Hello, everybody. This is G with the crew from the SITREP podcast, and we are coming to you live and in color. Well, we're live at least, mostly. I am trying to get the one final connection up and running for everybody, and we're good to go. So, with me, we're all basically spread out across the world. Nobody's in the studio except myself. And that is just because we have no choice. So bear with us as we get through this crazy time in the world right now. And we will be with you guys very shortly as we get everything going up here. So while I'm getting the final connection set up, Ralph, how you doing?
I'm doing all right.
How are you holding up with all this craziness going on?
Can I just go back to work?
Right? It's just crazy,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it is. I mean, this week has been online meetings and all sorts using Teams and stuff and getting used to that. So,
Yeah.
and that it's just insane. And it's looking maybe September. The university's planning for September return.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
September?
September.
That's crazy.
hmm
I don't know how I could handle being out that long.
It's
You know?
it's just where I think where the UK is in the trajectory of the virus.
Yeah.
But it may be earlier, but there's planning going on for September.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
But where the UK is in lockdown, I know it's down to your individual governors over there, isn't it? To put whichever states, because this is mandated. Our lockdown's mandated from the government itself.
Yeah. That's just crazy. I tell you what. I mean it's pretty much mandated here. It's just one of those things. Um, you have no choice, really.
Yeah.
So
Stay in, save lives.
yeah, that's exactly it. All right, Gaz, how are you holding up?
Yeah, I don't know how many paces it is from my bedroom to my sink and from the furthest corner to the furthest corner of my building. So it's 12 paces from where my workspace I'm sat now to my sink, and it's 15 paces from my front door to the furthest corner of my flat. So, yeah, I'm farming nice rabbit runs now.
Yeah.
I'd never thought I'd do that in the flat, as I consistently just walk in and around the place.
That's crazy.
I've been out like four times in 3 weeks, maybe four or five times I've been outside in 3 weeks. So, yeah, interesting. And I know what retirement feels like for me.
Yeah, it's not that much fun,
surrounded
is
by
it?
half-finished paint jobs and food wrappers. But no, holding on. I think June now it was going to be May, and there's a review for me in May, but June is what they're now telling me. So
what is review?
So the majority of guys that are not high risk, that are basically on Easter break at the moment, Easter leave. So all we've done is done what was a seasonal stand down with an extra week or two, depending on who you are. And those at high risk are the 12-week stand down with the potential to extend. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what comes of it. The guys that go back in work, they'll obviously have meetings almost straight away with the medical staff, the medical centre. One of the first people to have symptoms on camp was the medical officer at my unit, so he was immediately out of action.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so, yeah, it'd be interesting to see how this all changes how we do our role.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm getting updates and briefs via comms with work about what we're looking to do and what the plan going forward is and what's changed. So, yeah, it's an ever fluid situation, but there is some good framework for what's going to happen next for the military.
Oh, okay. Hey,
Yeah.
Skoback has joined us, and I guess I'm only coming off on the left channel. That's because I have my mic set to stereo, and I only have the input, which is mono. Sorry about that. because I kind of think I figured out one of the audio problems. Let me take and put me back to mono when we have multiple people in the studio and it's like you can't hear me because it's set at mono. And then at that time we have multiple channels going in. So Skoback, if you could let me know if you hear me better now. All right. And then down in Florida, is it sunny today, Jim?
The weather's been gorgeous.
Oh my God, I hate
Weather
you.
has absolutely gorgeous. February. Okay. February through April are the reasons you live in Florida.
Yeah.
Because the weather down here is miserable the rest of the time. You're either dodging wildfires, hurricanes, or tourists from New York. Sorry to everybody from New York, but stop coming down here. No, I'm just kidding. We need your money, so please keep coming. I'm only kidding. No, so the weather's great. It's just too bad that now we're not forbidden or whatever. We're not prevented from going outside, but it's almost like unless you're going for a walk or a jog or something, like what's the point? Yeah. The beaches are closed. Everything to do outside is closed. The parks are closed. So, I mean, I'm getting a little more exercise as far as just like walking around the neighborhood or whatever, but that's about it.
Gotcha.
As far as, I'm not going crazy. Outside of that, work has been insanely busy. This is the first day off I've had in 19 days. So work has been nuts. When they say work from home, they mean it.
Yeah.
Over here in the tech sector, they're not playing around. And actually, we're doing really well because our company is about letting people work and play from anywhere. So we're actually doing not too shabby at the moment. All that said, we have no idea. Now, right now, we're tentatively scheduled to come back on April 17th, but I think that date is absurd. I'm awaiting an email from somebody that says, it's going to be sometime in May or sometime in, who knows when. But it was going to be April 1st. Now it's April 17th, and who knows what it's going to be.
Oh, wow. Well, it's just crazy how life has kind of been put on hold for a lot of people, or at least altered drastically, and then others not so much. I have been in isolation for last week because I developed symptoms. Working in healthcare, I was on the front lines, but thankfully things have improved, so I'm cleared to go back to work on Monday. So that's a good thing. All right, let's stop talking about the sad, stupid stuff and let's talk about fun stuff. So, Ralph, you said you actually got hobby in.
I did today, actually. I did some hobby today. It's only been 6 months, I think, since I did anything. Well, I had primed the SAS counterterrorism set from Spectre, the ones with the black overalls and the gas masks and stuff. So I started painting, grabbed the first minion to do some, like a test almost, because I've got some AK paints. I bought the German Panzer set ages ago of AK paints. So to try and put some highlight on not having straight black, I grabbed one of them and I took the way the AK paints work are you have different layers. So there's like a dark shadow color, not pure black, right up to a light shadow color. So I picked like a middle one and then I dry brushed over the top of them to pick out some of the raised bits of the miniature, and then just did the gun and the webbing in a green. It's a grey green. Went over with some ink, green ink, because when I checked my GW camo shade, it had dried up because the lid hadn't been shut properly.
I hate those pots.
Yeah.
Because you think they're closed, and then the back end of it's still open, cracked open. So, yeah. So
I had to dig out the army painter green to go over the boots and the webbing and the helmet with some green, just to give it some thing. And
Army painter has a good army shade.
I need to get that one. This was
really
just
good.
what I had on the pot.
Yeah.
And then as well as I grabbed, because I've got some of the texture paints from Games Workshop. I grabbed the Astro Granite, which is like a concrete color, and I put that on the base so it makes it look like he's standing on concrete instead of being what I normally use as like a grilling earth or something to do cracked earth, like for desert and stuff. That's what my Spetsnaz are on. But
Oh.
I've decided to put these on like an urban base.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, it looks really good. Actually, I've put some pictures up on the Spectre site, so and I'll put them up in ours as well.
Nice.
But what I might wait and do is do what I did with the Humvee and the Spetsnaz, is get them all painted together and then put them on a turntable and take a small video. So it's probably better than putting picture sort of static images up.
Nice.
So yeah, I managed to get some hobby done.
Yeah. And Skoback agrees with us, says the Army Painter Military Shade is great. I like it. It really helps. It really adds a nice underlying tone, no matter what type of camo, if you're doing multicam or CAD pat, any of those. So it really does work nice. Awesome, Ralph. I'm glad you got some actual hobby in.
For a change.
And then there's Gaz. I think Gaz has just been sitting on his butt doing nothing lately.
Yeah, I've not seen much from Gaz.
Yeah, really. I mean, what have you been doing?
Eating, sleeping, finding reasons to get out of bed every day. So I've been doing a bit of a mix, really, to stop yourself going insane. Obviously, we've been keeping up with the View and a Brew. So we've got a couple more models in the bag for that.
Nice.
I put in another order for some additional Spectre miniatures to flush out the force a bit more. You'll be happy to know we're now adding. I only got 7 minis because I wanted to keep using different ones, because obviously I've painted some and I wanted to paint at different versions. So to keep it different, out of the 7 models, we've got 2 LMGs and 2 RPGs. Oh. So bringing some real fire support for the 13 days equals 13 hours game.
Yeah.
So that's been quite fun, getting them cleaned up. I've done some prep work on some 251 Hano mags for Flames of War. So I've got a Panzer Grenadier unit that I'm looking to do. So we've done some cleaning work on them. Walking Dead. I've been finding that the sort of the friendly forces, the non-zombies, are quite usable as, well, all sorts really, for sort of modern games or for a setting of like a bank robbery and things. Some really nice minis out there within that range. So I've put one up today on the website that we painted, and he's carrying like a Heckler and Koch MP5.
Nice.
Or something similar. One of the other characters, Andrea, she's got a Browning high power sort of safari rifle with a scope. So you could really see these being used in a lot of the scenarios that are available in things like Spectre.
Yeah, most definitely.
And if you have an aversion to metals, because some people do, it might be an option if you were looking for plastics. But there's plenty out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so been keeping busy, slapping paint on things, seeing what sticks. I feel like a hermit.
But you know what? You're producing great content.
Cheers.
So, I'm glad that you're isolated, because it's making great shows, man.
Get more out of me that way.
Right? And I tell you what, your painting skills, I mean, you had great painting skills before, but just watching you over the past few weeks, it's just amazing the the next level you're taking it to. So,
thank you. I am finding that I think it's Miniac, who's a guy on YouTube who says paint more minis, and he screams it at the end of every episode. And I'm finding that, because I'm doing it in a compressed time, is a real truth to finding ways of doing things, because you get the opportunity to try what you've seen, such as doing grey work and white work on guns to give them a metal look without using metal colours.
Yeah.
And when I first tried it, it looked silly, and now it's getting to be something I'm finding quite easy to see. And the shadowing of models, the contrast helped me to begin with, but now I'm starting to understand it should be darker under his arm because it's sticking out, or under the edge of the shirt. So yeah, just by doing, I'm definitely learning a lot.
Yeah, it just goes to the old adage that practice makes perfect. Not that anybody's perfect, but it definitely helps your skills. And I found that out on Thursday night's incredibly difficult and frustrating brew and view that I did, the live stream. I was a mess. I was out of sync. It's been over 6 weeks since I painted anything, and I felt like I was a noob all over again, and nothing was working right. My airbrush didn't work right. Paints were spilling all over the place. I was getting paint all over me. the car, it just wasn't laying down really nice. I mean, it's coming along now, and we'll be back. But if you're not painting regularly, you definitely lose that fine edge, and it seems like you take a couple steps back, and you kind of have to start over again. So
yeah.
It is definitely, there is it's a fine motor skill, and it's like airbrushing. If you don't train your hand and your finger control, and you're not doing it constantly, you kind of lose that fine motor skill. So definitely it's something, a good friend of ours, Dave Taylor, who does some amazing painting and wrote that book.
Yep.
He says you should spend at least a half hour each day painting something, and that'll help with your skills. And I agree with that. So
that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And airbrush is my next. So I've got everything now for an airbrush together at the house, and I've not picked it up yet. So that's my next play. One, because I want to lay down the base colors with an airbrush, so I get a better coat, more controllable than the spray tins. And two, because I got a lovely gift of IJN. Ford Dust 1947 from a couple of friends of mine in the US, namely yourself and Don, and their walkers are a good size.
Yeah.
So it's another thing where contrast won't help me, and it'll be a long time to panel paint them. So I picked up an airbrush. In fact, I've also picked up a Star Wars Legion ATST as another big item with a lot of flat surfaces to play around with. So yeah, I've got the time. And hopefully one day I might have the talent.
It's like regular painting. It just takes practice and understanding the paints and flow. I think my compressor, my little Ninja Iowata, is given out because I just could not get paint through it, and I thought I had it thinned down enough. You want it the consistency of like low-fat milk, skim milk.
Right.
So, and it was just not flowing right. So the paint could be old too. I haven't used those paints in a while, the automotive airbrush paints. So, but I definitely need to upgrade to a better compressor, one that I can dial in, pressure's better, and all that stuff. So I definitely will be upgrading that. So Jim, you have been awfully quiet. I know you have been off, and you've been getting a ton of sleep and have not been doing much, and you should be fully rested and excited. So what you up to?
Let's see. So since last show, we've done another episode of HK Ops. We have another episode of HK Ops coming up tomorrow. And we've also started off our Dien Ben Phu series with Valor and Victory with my friend Piotr over in Poland.
Oh, nice.
So, we have a game later today. So if you hear a keyboard in the background, I apologize. I'm literally still writing the special scenario rules for that game. Because that's gonna start about half an hour after we finish this recording.
Yeah.
This game's gonna be actually one of the big ones. So far we've done some of the French Foreign Legion, the Paras. There was one, then later a second battalion of paratrooper French Foreign Legion, and Dien Ben Phu. This is, for anyone who might not know, the climactic battle at the end of the First Indochina War. 1945 to 1954. So this is March of 1954 is when we're starting. And we're expanding like we always do. Valor and Victory it's a native World War II setting, so to speak, into more modern settings. So we've done a whole bunch of settings going all the way up to Somalia in 1993. Indochina 1954 is an easy one as far as, rules go. It's basically just 9 years after World War II with hand-me-down weapons. So it's really just almost like, late war World War II. There's very few weapons and rules and so on that are incompatible with, I guess, a usual World War II setting.
Sure.
So this one's actually pretty simple. We're playing with our usual modern rules, minus civilians. There were no real civilians in this setting. That's not entirely true, but it's close enough. As far as civilians at Dien Ben Phu, but prisoners, casualty evacuation, booby traps, things like that. So far we've had a pretty successful game. There's a couple of parts up on our various SITREP channels for our French Paratrooper Foreign Legion patrol game up in the hills northeast of Strong Point Beatrice. In early March of 1954. That one was pretty successful. We've been gaming that sometimes on my lunch hour, because again, I'm working from home. So, we still get a lunch hour. So I literally just get over on Skype with my friend Piotr, and we just game for an hour, and we record it and put it up or whatever. And then the next day we might do another one. This game that we're starting later on today is going to be a little bit bigger. No more patrols. We're not going to do the more classic stuff that people tend to associate with a battle like Dien Bien Phu, where the Viet Minh under General Giap actually start to assault some of these French and Allied strongpoints. So the first one to fall was Beatrice. Strongpoint Beatrice was actually 3 strongpoints in one of the hills to the northeast of the Dien Bien Phu airfield.
Uh-huh.
And I've got we got a battalion-sized game. So you've been in a battalion-sized game of Valor and Victory. You know how big they are.
Oh, yeah.
But a battalion-sized Valor and Victory game. 428th Infantry of the 141st Infantry Regiment, 312th Viet Minh Division, going up against 2 understrength companies. Yes, you heard that right, folks. 2 understrength companies of French Foreign Legion. Not Paras, but nevertheless still French Foreign Legion. So they're still elite troops. They're outnumbered a little bit less than 3-1. 2 understrength companies equals a little bit more than 1 full strength company against a full battalion of Viet Minh. So it's going to be a nasty one for sure. However, then again, the French are in a fortified hilltop trench network. It's amazing how we actually have photographs of Strongpoint Beatrice from the period. It's amazing how much it looks like a World War I board. In fact, I went back into my 1918 World War I assets or whatever when I built this map, and it's basically a World War I table transported over to Southeast Asia. Networked trenches, lots of craters, no jungle in this second game, no jungle at all. It's all been razed to the ground. The French obviously want to clear their lanes of fire. The last thing you want to do in a jungle setting is to set up some sort of defensive fire base or a strong point and have the tree line end right at your trenches.
Right.
You have to clear that out because you have to make the enemy cross over a lot of open ground before they get to you. Huge belts of barbed wire. We have American 30 cal and 50 caliber machine guns in there. We have French light machine guns, magazine-fed machine guns. It's World War I transported into French Indochina.
Yeah.
So we're going to see how it goes. Games this size are a little tough to balance. Games this asymmetrical are a little tough to balance. It's one thing when you're doing a couple squads, skirmish style versus maybe a platoon. Now we're talking about, companies and battalions. So any percentage off or what's the word I'm looking for here? Any percentage inconsistencies or variations in your balance when you scale up and up and up and up, you can get away with a 5% variance in your design when you're at a certain level. When you get up to that level times 10, that 5% variance becomes a problem. So we're hoping that's not going to happen, but we'll see what happens. We got lots of Viet Minh artillery support. Viet Minh artillery at Dien Bien Phu was off the scale. It's absolutely crazy. It is a night battle. General Giap did ensure that he would launch all of his assaults at night, thus taking out the advantage of French air support and air superiority, because planes back in those days didn't fly at night very much, at least not in a tactical sense. The French still have a couple pieces of light artillery. By that I mean some 120 and 81 millimeter mortars. But it's the Alamo. You're in a fortified position. You're being hit on 3 sides. You have the high ground. You've got the sandbags. You've got the bunkers. You've got the belt-fed machine guns. You've got the barbed wire. But here come that first wave of Viet Minh sappers. And we're gonna see how it goes. That game starts in about 2.5 hours.
Wow. Are you going to have the French paratroopers in the game at some point?
We had French paratroopers in yesterday's game. In last week's game.
Okay.
That was the part of Dien Bien Phu where the French still had all their strong points, and they were doing the. So for people who might not be aware, I do mean it this time, super fast. Dien Bien Phu is an airfield in the way, like nowhere near where the Americans would be fighting Vietnam War later. This is not the Vietnam War. This is Indochina War. There is a huge difference. This is way the hell up, almost near China and Laos. The ass end of what would become North Vietnam. It wasn't even Vietnam yet. It was still French Indochina. And there was this tiny little airfield that the French had set up, and their idea was to drop 10 to 13,000 troops of various, coalitions or whatever, out into this airfield by air, then to continue to supply them by air. They were really playing around with operational-sized air mobile operations. Mm-hmm. They even got some light armor in there, some M24 Chaffies. And the idea was they were going to put this operation base way the hell back in the enemy's backfield, and then from there range out into the enemy's, backyard, so to speak, and raise, 13 kinds of hell. It didn't work because they picked this airfield that's in a valley surrounded by mountains, and they completely underestimated how the Viet Minh were going to ring this thing with estimates between 50 and 100,000 troops. There were 100,000 people there. It depends on what you consider an actual combat soldier. There were artillery crews, there were supply troops, logistic trains. There were 100,000 people, so depending on how you want to count it up, the French are outnumbered 10 to 1 at this point. The Viet Minh have all the high ground. And they completely underestimated how much artillery the Viet Minh could get their hands on, because by now they're being supported by the Soviets and by China. And they've captured half the arsenals of the old French garrison, which is old American stuff left over from World War II, Lend-Lease. So, yeah, this guy's got hundreds of guns, Katyusha rockets, 57mm recoilless rifles, you name it, he's got it. He's got all the high ground, he's got you surrounded, and he just starts shelling you into the center of the earth. And so the French, Paris, that you mentioned, in the earlier stages of the siege, this went on for months, said, okay, look, we have to find where these artillery batteries are. Let's send patrols up into these jungle hills, find these artillery batteries, or at the very least take prisoners. That can let us know where these batteries are. Because the French artillery commander at Dien Bien Phu was not able to find the Viet Minh batteries. And once he did, he couldn't outrange them because his guns were too small. And again, the Viet Minh were on high ground. When enemy artillery is on high ground, he has the range on you because his shells will, just by physics, travel further than yours will. So eventually, the colonel in charge of French artillery went into his bunker with a hand grenade and took the quick way out. The French, no, they did. He did. They literally just filled in his bunker because they didn't want to let the rest of the garrison know that he was gone. That's how bad things got at Dien Bien Phu. It's the Alamo times 10. It's Rorke's Drift times 100 without the happy ending. It's, none of those people made it out of there. We're going to see if Piotr does any better today. So one of the first big set-piece offensives where the Viet Minh started to overrun these French positions took place at one of these strong points named Beatrice. Again, we talk about this a couple times during the streams. These strong points all have French women's names. Legend has it they were named after the mistresses of the garrison commander. Beatrice, Claudine, Huguette, Isabelle, Gabrielle, Huguette, Dominique. There's 9 of them in all. Plus he has 3 drop zones named after other girlfriends: Simone, Octavia, and Natasha. It's a wonder, this guy. No wonder this guy lost the war. He didn't have any time to, lead his troops. He's running around with 12 girlfriends. Guess what? You're going to lose the war. You need to keep your eye on the ball, dude. But I mean, that's the legend, and that was what was going around at the time. Who knows if this, he probably just picked out 12 names out of a hat. Yeah. But anyway, the first one to go down was Beatrice. So poor Beatrice. There were actually 3 assaults on the night of 13 to 14 March 1954. We're going to do one of them today, and even that is kind of big for Valor and Victory. There's a lot of pieces on this table. To do all of Beatrice would be the other 2 battalions of 141st Viet Minh Infantry. So that would be more of a Panzer leader kind of a thing. But we're sticking with Valor and Victory for now. We're going to do we're going to do the first of the 3 assaults on Beatrice. We'll see how that goes. And then after that, there's other strong points that go down. And finally, the big attack goes down later on in April. And I think the garrison surrenders or I should say what's left of the garrison, finally goes down on 7 May 1954. So this was all Piotr's idea. He's a big Vietnam War / Indochina fan.
Uh-huh.
So we're doing one of the parts of Vietnam that we don't see a lot of attention for over here in the States. It's not the American part of it's not the Vietnam War. It's the war that came before that.
Right.
It is a different war. It is a very different war. And for Valor and Victory is easy because again it's basically World War II troops and equipment. Some upgrades or whatever, but not too many. We're going to see how that goes, and we might be able to put some excerpts up on YouTube later on in the week. I doubt we'll finish today, so maybe we'll stream live some of the later sections earlier next week. I honestly can't, promise anything, but
Sure.
I'll try to record at least some of it. And we'll see how it goes.
Excellent. So, hobby for me, obviously I painted the one vehicle. Still working on it. And I've been printing some 6mm modern tanks, 80s tanks, for a certain rule set that backers got a preview of, a PDF copy of their rule book. Ralph, did you get your copy?
I did.
And have you had a chance to read through it, or at least peruse through it?
I've got it open in front of us, actually.
Excellent. And guys, I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see it. If you let me know if you see it.
Yep, I see it.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So what we're talking about is the new rule set of battle group called NORTHAG or NORTHAG, depending on where you're from in the world. It's a project with Plastic Soldier Company and the writers and developers of Battle Group, the rule set, which I know Jim's a big fan of. Before we get into the meat of this rule set, Jim, what is it about Battle Group that you like a lot? Just for give people a taste.
Again, Battle Group, and we had a discussion with Pierce earlier in the year.
Yeah, and I apologize. We thought we were going to have him on today, but I think we have a scheduling mix-up, so we'll try and get him on another show at another time.
And what we were talking about was, again, we knew about Battle Group. We didn't have the book at the time. This is several months ago.
Yeah.
And so he was just telling us about it. And one of the points that he was making was that, yes, it shares a lot of DNA with Battle Group, but it's not Battle Group.
Yeah.
However, it does bring a lot of the stuff that made Battle Group great over to NORTHAG, which is Northern Army Group for people who might not know. It's for the moment it focuses on British Army of the Rhine fighting a theoretical Soviet invasion of Northern Germany. Northern West Germany, I should say, in the early to mid 1980s. So, what made Battle Group great? God bless. Warren asked me this question once over on Tabletop, and I went on for like 45 minutes, and I never got close to the answer. He finally had to kind of cut me off. He was very polite about it, though. He was like, "Oh, so what you're saying was a really great game?" I'm like, "Yeah. I'm sorry." No, it's number one. It's a and I always hesitate to say this because I don't want to scare people off.
Uh-huh.
But Battle Group is it's my favorite World War II miniatures game. It's my favorite, within the miniature genre. As far as what makes it great, it doesn't, to be like a big history buff or whatever, or be like a big military, I don't want to say tactician or whatever, but somebody who really gets into the nuts and bolts of how this stuff really works, how an army is really put together. It's not like a list that you can just, these are the models I have. Here's what I want to play. I mean, it allows you to do that if you want, but at the same time, with the point costs and so on and so forth, it encourages you without requiring it. It really does walk a pretty fine line, and it does it with considerable aplomb, if you ask me. It rewards you for being historical and for playing a historical army. However, it doesn't require it.
Gotcha.
And then as far as how the game actually works, the game has it really strikes a great balance at, I guess, what you could call battlefield chaos. So wargaming has a couple of really serious, wargaming in general has one or two, really two, essential contradictions. Number one, war is never fun, but you want your war game to be fun. Number two, war is nothing but chaos.
Yeah.
And the one thing you don't want your war game to be is chaotic. You want a cohesive and clear and concise rule set without it making it feel like, oh, you go, I go. The whole German army just stopped because now it's the Russians' turn. So you have like this German army kind of standing there in a freeze frame while the Russians take their turn. And, you know, the battle group gets rid of a lot of that. It gets rid of a lot of that in the turn sequence. It gets rid of a lot of that in what they call their battle. What's the actual term for it now? Battle rating counter system. When I first read the rules, and I hadn't played it yet, when I read the rules for battle group, I said, this sounds too random. This is literally like Go Fish with a deck of cards. You know, there's no way this is going to work as far as, you know, until you try it. And you draw chits so often, and you roll orders dice so often. And it's usually like a 2d6 kind of a bell curve kind of thing that's mostly to hit, that's mostly to penetrate armor and so on and so forth. That, again, crazy stuff does happen.
Yeah.
But it's not like, you know, clown cars and bumper cars, you know, clowns with water pistols with bumper cars. It's nothing like that at all. The crazy stuff happens, but it's rare enough to where when something weird happens, it feels special. And meanwhile, sound planning, execution of basic military principles are what's really going to carry you through a lot of that game. You also have no idea when the game's going to end. It runs on what they call the battle. I just had this right. Battle counter rating system. So your unit has a certain battle rating, you know, from whatever, doesn't matter, like from 20 to 40, somewhere in there usually in most games. And whenever something bad happens to you, you lose a unit, you get hit by an airstrike, you lose a commander, you get hit with flamethrowers. You know, there's a list of actual triggers. You have to draw out of this little pool of inverted counters, blind draw, what they call a battle rating counter. And that battle rating counter is numbered from 1 to 5. And that's how many battle rating points you lose. The enemy, or I shouldn't say the enemy, the opponent sees you draw that, and when you put it face down on your side of the table, you do it in such a way where the opponent knows how many battle rating counters you've drawn, but doesn't know what that number is. So you never know how close your enemy really is to breaking. And when you hit that battle rating, the game's over.
Gotcha.
Doesn't matter if you're winning. Doesn't matter if the enemy has one unit left. Doesn't matter if you're sitting on all the objectives. If you hit that rating, you're done. And this is where you see a lot of these old stories from World War II where it's like, oh, the Germans were pushing the Soviets into this village. They were on the cusp of victory, but then they got orders to go do something else, or they got orders to withdraw, or the commander gave up because he thought he was losing. He never knew how close he was to absolute victory. That happens in Battle Group all the time. And again, once in a while you can draw. So there's like little consolation prizes in that battle rating where you can draw, and instead of getting a number from 1 to 5, you get enemy vehicle breaks down, or enemy unit runs out of ammunition, or enemy unit or an airstrike shows up, a friendly airstrike. And those things are in there, and they're in there just enough to where, as far as like not that many, the devil's in the details in Battle Group. Before I go off on another 40-minute rant here. Even the mix of those 1 to 5s, there's only a few 1s in there, there's only a few 5s in there, there's a lot of 2s, there's a couple 4s, and then there's a lot of 3s. So you can look at the enemy, you know, if you and I were playing a game of Battle Group, you knew that my rating was 40, and you're looking at where I have, 15 battle ratings drawn, and you're like, okay, 15 times 2.5 is about 35, maybe. You know what? He's close. He's probably close. I can go ahead and risk that one last big assault, even though my own unit my own force is about to collapse or whatever. And once you go ahead and make that last push, or doesn't he? Now those 15 battle ratings that I'm drawing might be all 1s and 2s. Mostly, I might be a lot stronger than you think, or maybe I only have 10, but they're all 4s and 5s. You never know how close the enemy is to breaking. You know how well your unit is. You know how close, because you're getting screams over the radio, you're getting cries for stretcher bearers. You know exactly how much you're bleeding. But as far as the enemy goes, how much do you really know? You might hear some yelling in a foreign language. You see some fires in the tree line. You have no idea how bad you've really hurt the enemy in real combat.
Right.
Stuff like that, how they handle support assets. You don't just buy artillery missions. You buy priority. And okay, on a priority 1 corps level, or a priority 2 army level, or a priority 3 battalion level, or whatever, you buy the level that you're getting your artillery support from, and that's going to be whether or not your offboard artillery is 81 millimeter mortars, 120 millimeter mortars, 105s, 155s, 203s, even, for really big howitzers. That's whether you're at, regiment, division, corps, army level of support. And then there's also a priority level, first, second, or third, how likely you are to get those guns. And that's what you pay your points for.
Yeah.
Same with airstrikes. And then it's a lot more realistic as far as making you feel like you're part of a larger battle. So anything in World War II, it's not just your table. There's 20 tables to your left and 20 tables to your right. And when you run out of battle ratings, it's like, okay, you got a call from regiment command. Stop. Turn around, come home. But I'm right there. Stop, turn around, and come home. That happens in battle group. And it can happen to your opponent too. All of a sudden the enemy just has to leave. And you really have no idea why. Again, I'm making it sound very random, and it sounds random when you read the rules, but it's really a nice mix of ingredients to where it's just the right blend of battlefield chaos and your planning and execution, and then improvisation when your plan doesn't work. Your usual, battlefield command kind of stuff.
Interesting. Just real quick, Skoback just commented and said, lost games of battle group due to opponent drawing a chit that emptied my tank's ammo supply. I didn't know that was a thing.
It really isn't. When you draw, I don't want to get into technical things about battle group, because really we're not talking about battle group.
Right.
When you draw that counter, the ammo counter can only be used against a non-vehicle unit. Now, for a vehicle, you can get a breakdown. Maybe he meant a breakdown. That's happened to me a couple of times.
Oh, okay.
But a tank isn't supposed to run out of ammunition, I don't think. However, your tanks can run out of ammo, because you do, for really big units like tanks, you do track ammunition. So it's not really a light game. And I always kind of hesitate from saying, oh, this game is super realistic, it's really detailed, it's super historical accurate. Because it's still a miniatures game, so it's going to have those limitations.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not trying to scare anybody away. It works for casual play as well as for hardcore grognard play, in a way that I think a lot of other systems don't. I mean, we can talk about games. We talk about games like Advanced Squad Leader. You can't really play Advanced Squad Leader casually. You can't really play bolt action. I mean, I've seen people try, and their efforts are admirable. But playing a game like Bolt Action, hardcore grognard style, is tough. Battle Group really kind of puts its arms around both worlds. And I haven't had a chance to read the NORTHAG rules, but I'm assuming NORTHAG kind of does the same thing, because it's from the same people.
Well, let's take a look, shall we, guys? And as a special treat to those who are following us and watching right now, we're going to share the book with you on video. So this is going to be a video broadcast as well as an audio. So if you're only listening to it, we'll try and describe the pages as we go. And if you're watching, get ready. Here we go. Okay, so I have the cover here. What are these tanks I'm looking at? They look very foreign to me. Ha ha.
I will be quiet. Let someone else answer.
I'm staying quiet.
Are those chieftains?
Yeah.
Okay.
They look like 6mm chieftains.
Yep, it's chieftain.
Okay, so so is it a typical British Army thing to put camo netting over the barrels of the main gun?
Couldn't tell you, being aviation platoons.
Right.
So, but it doesn't help. I know that. In modern times, it might have helped back then. I don't see why not. I mean, if that's potentially, if you're going to hold down, but you need the barrel to move through the whatever you're firing through, tree line, bushes, it would help disguise the fact that it's poking out the.
Yeah.
end, I suppose. You know, at a glance,
Yeah.
why not? It's not a lot of effort for potentially a good reward.
Okay. Jim, any comments?
About what? A camouflage on the thermal sleeve of the gun barrel?
I
Lots of people do it,
Okay.
especially back in the 80s.
Okay.
There's no real harm to the gun. Again, with modern ballistics, it might be a little bit less. As far as being physically, or I should say visually spotted out of a Soviet tank turret, that's going to be a lot tougher
Yeah.
to justify. Because if you've ever been, I've been inside a T-55, I've been inside a T-72. Yes, I actually did squeeze my fat ass into a T-72. It was holy crap. I don't know how anybody fights inside those things. They need a little bit of baby oil and baby powder to get me in and out of that turret. But the idea of fighting, again, Soviet doctrine is always to fight buttoned up. So it is not easy to see anything from inside of a tank. So visually, are you going to hide anything from that? Again, tanks 95% of the time are not fighting. No matter what we see in war games, sorry, war gamers, 95% of the time tanks are not fighting other tanks. They're fighting something else, or they're being attacked by something else.
Yeah.
So as far as what these guys have to watch out for, there's also infantry teams and BMP crews with AT-5s. And there's also, helicopter gunships and, who knows what else. So, again, this is 1983. The Americans, West Germans, and British and other NATO forces were well into the age of thermal sighting, against which this camouflage on the thermal sleeve does exactly nothing. But how advanced were the Soviets in 1983 as far as their thermal sights? Probably not very much. It might have helped a little, at least until your first fire. Again, the British are fighting mostly defensive, as well as the Americans and the West Germans. NATO is pretty much on the defense in most of these 1980s theoretical scenarios. So you're hull down or you're in a tree line, and the enemy's coming at you, and you're going to get that first shot. You want to make sure you get that first shot. Because with the lethality of modern weapons, again, 80s is not really modern anymore, but with the lethality of these kind of weapons, he who shoots first shoots last. I mean, it's you don't miss, and the enemy does not survive when you hit. So getting that first round in is critical, absolutely critical. Anything that allows you to stay hidden long enough for you to get the enemy under your gun sights and to get that first good volley of anti-tank shells in against Soviet armor is going to be crucial.
I think the other thing is satellites weren't really up and running either, so you're looking at aerial spot
Yeah.
as well as infantry. So anything to break up straight lines, the shape.
Mm-hmm.
It's all part of the camo, isn't it?
Yeah.
Shape, shadow, silhouette, all the shine.
That's a very good point. Yeah, extremely good point. People tend to think the camouflage is about color. It's got nothing to do with color. It's about breaking up the outline of that of anything.
Yeah.
Your helmet, the front of your rifle, the front of your gun, anything that breaks up the silhouette. Because when the eye is scanning, looking for the enemy, your brain is processing for certain shapes that are key to danger. An enemy's helmet, an enemy's rifle barrel, at the end of a gun barrel of a tank or something like that. Anything that breaks up that outline.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. I mean, if anything, he's kind of skinned. I've seen pictures of especially West German leopards where it looks like a bush with tracks. How effective that was, I don't know. It looks kind of funny, but hey, if it allows you to get in that first crucial 5 or 6 seconds at the beginning of a prospective tank engagement, it was worth it.
Yeah. All right. So this game is set in obviously West Germany in 1983. That seems to be the commonality of these games because Team Yankees are roughly the same year. Is it 83, 84, if I'm not mistaken?
Team Yankee is 5 August 1985.
Oh, 85. Okay. So this one, if you look at the intro, they do a really nice job of setting the stage. It talks about Reagan and, the Star Wars, the SDI initiative, and how that affected the Soviets and how they felt that, now the United States had the upper hand. I'm just going to go through it because I don't want to give away all the stuff. But, and then they Red Army begins, as they call it, the Red Army begins major exercises in the Ukraine and Belarus and with the 5th and 7th Guards tanks armies. That sound right to you, Jim? 5th and 7th Guards? I'm not up on my Soviet stuff other than I know what to kill, so I'm not sure on the actual units.
I've never heard of those two exact armies.
Okay.
8th Guards was down by us in southern East Germany, Czech Republic. 2nd Tank, 3rd Shock, 20th Tank were up north. I'm not 100% sure with what was going on up north, so I might not be completely accurate on that. I'm pretty sure they stopped calling it the Red Army in 1947. RKKA, the Red Army of Workers and Peasants. I'm pretty sure they just became like the Soviet Army.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then specifically here, this is the next level up from the army he's talking about. Remember again, actually, I'm sorry, Ukraine and Belarus are 5th and 7th Guards armies. Okay, that's a totally different set of armies.
Oh, okay.
Than we would be looking at in a group of Soviet forces in Germany, GSFG. That's what the British would have been mostly going up against.
Uh-huh.
And you've got northern group of Soviet forces that's mostly a reserve element in extremely north part of Germany, extending back into Poland. And then there's central group of Soviet forces that's in the southern part of extreme southern part of East Germany down in the Czech Republic, or Czechoslovakia in those days. And that is what we would have been fighting a little bit more of. The West German 3rd Corps, 5th and 7th U.S. Corps down in Bavaria, Würzburg, Frankfurt, Fulda Gap, stuff like that. But this is further north. So I'm a feeling that the 5th and 7th, unless, again, it's a theoretical war, so maybe they kind of made up a little bit of a setting here, but the 5th and 7th Guards tank armies, they're not really presenting these as the ones that would have been in northern part of West Germany.
Uh-huh.
Those, I'm pretty sure, were the 2nd, 20th, 3rd Shock, and 8th Guards further south. And there's a bunch of other ones I'm probably forgetting in there, which 5 and 7th might be among them.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's see here. Then it says, that they tried to do a diplomatic approach. The Soviets did not respond. They had exercises, which led to a collision between warships. And then on, let's see here, June 11th at 2:35 a.m., Soviet and East German Spetsnaz commando units and sleeper cells executed their orders for disruptive raids across European members of NATO, targeting airfields, munition dumps, nuclear weapons storage areas, and command and control hubs, which is 100% accurate. That's what it would have happened. They also attacked major railway marshalling yards because, in Europe, railways are huge. Bridges. Before dawn, the first preparatory bombardments crashed down along the German and Austrian borders. As bombs and missiles rained down, the first line of Warsaw Pact armored divisions move up to their jumping-off points on the borders. And then the invasion of Western Europe begun, and that's where the rules start. So it's a really nice background. I really thought they did a really nice job putting in a lot of realism elements to it. They talk about Reforger, which, if I'm not mistaken, Reforger, they've really started cranking back up on that. I heard they were moving a lot of equipment back over to Europe. I don't know if that was the tensions that, between the Soviets and Russia now and the Americans, over around wintertime when things got a little hot and heavy. So I know they're doing some new, whether they were supposed to before all the COVID stuff started. So we did Reforger years ago. With the 82nd, we went over for a while to do some stuff. So it's very interesting. Hey, your friend has joined us, Jim.
My friend has joined us?
Yeah, your combat mate, who you'll be playing later today, has joined us.
Oh, cool.
So,
hello, Mr. Piotr. I hope you're ready for a nice big ass whipping in Valorant Victory today. No,
Trash talk starts. So, Gaz, as a member of the British military forces currently,
do
you guys still, without giving away anything you're not supposed to, do you guys still train up on a possible Eastern European conflict, or is it mostly, real world conflicts as we see them now?
So every year, as part of a NATO exercise, a number of countries do exercises close to the Russian border.
Okay.
I was going to say, if it goes down, it's not going down in Germany anymore.
I think last year was around 45,000 troops.
Wow.
And that's like a yearly thing. In the last couple of years, Brits have been in Estonia, for example, which is the corridor from one part of the peninsula to another, shall we say. So yeah, there's always a NATO presence. So essentially, it's very similar in the feel to this.
Okay.
Both sides do exercises within sight of the border, within reason. So aircraft will push close to borders. I don't think anything's ever crossed. It's many ways. It's like we get the Soviet bears, flying over the north of the UK and different parts of Europe. I imagine America gets the odd one as well. So it's it's a hello, we're still here, just in case. Obviously, tensions changed quite a lot with Ukraine and Georgia in the last decade, with quite heavy movement and actual tank engagements in the streets. I don't know if you had much info on that, but there's a lot of power plays, and there's a lot of making sure everybody's ready and knows where they want to go and how we're going to do it. It's a yearly exercise for NATO. So awesome. I'm sure, and at the same time, normally Russia are doing the same thing on the other side.
Awesome.
You're talking about tank engagements in the streets. Are you talking about Ukraine 2014-15?
No, earlier. I think Georgia had an incident where
Georgia. Well, there's two wars in Chechnya, 95 and 2004.
Not a war. Just literally within like over a couple of days.
And then Georgia was 2008.
Yeah, because
then there's the obviously the latest in the Ukraine.
Yeah, it was the earlier one. So I remember seeing the news footage of the destroyed tanks in the streets, and they were all moderns.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, nobody was pulling punches that day, shall we say?
No.
What you see in Ukraine in 2014-15, and sadly, it's still simmering. It's not at the levels it used to be. But you see, this is where you can use a system like this in a non-theoretical setting if you wanted to, because a lot of these tanks are still the same. I mean, you mentioned earlier before we fired up the stream, G, some of your tanks were T-64s and T-80s. When the Soviet Union fell apart, the different republics, former Soviet republics, wound up with different, this goes into like the whole branching tree of Soviet tank evolution. And so you would wind up with, in the Ukraine, Russian supplied T-72s and T-90s. That's sort of like the left arm of that branch of evolution, up against T-64s and T-80s, which, air quotes, genetically are similar. That's that right-hand branch of Soviet tank evolution. And the Ukrainians still have upgraded T-64s. They have the brand new T-80s. They have the T-84, which is basically, they're continuing to develop that system of tanks, or whatever, that lineage of tanks, that tech tree almost, to put it in gaming terms. Because when the Soviet Union fell apart, all the T-64 factories and the T-80 factories were mostly in Kharkov, right there in Ukraine. Soviets pretty much lost the ability to build their own tanks because all their factories are now in other countries. So, or that particular tree of tanks. So all those other tanks you see are T-72s and T-90s and that evolution branch. And of course, now you've got the T-14, which is something totally new. Those are the tanks that you saw slugging it out in those, areas of Donbass, Donbass, northern Ukraine, some of these old World War II battlefields. Slavyansk was another bad one, up in 2014, 2015. So it's scary how easily you can take something like NORTHAG and use it in a more in a more real world, or less hypothetical kind of a setting.
Yeah.
What started that war was the election of a certain president there in Kiev, capital of the Ukraine, and one of his platforms, one of the planks in this platform was, I want to join the EU. And that's pretty much stage one of joining NATO. And the 1/3 of the Ukraine that is ethnically Russian said, oh, no, I don't think so. And that's literally when the war started, is the prospect of the Ukraine joining the EU, and then by implication, maybe in 10 or 15 years, becoming an actual NATO state. The idea of NATO expanding steadily eastward, this is why I wanted to talk about Reforger and where it was actually taking place. I don't think it's taking place, I don't know, because I'm not there anymore, but I seriously don't think it's taking place in West Germany anymore. First of all, there is no West Germany.
Right.
Because Germany's nowhere near the front line anymore. Poland is now a NATO state. The Baltic states that Gaz was mentioning, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, those are all NATO states.
Uh-huh.
Those are 3 former Soviet republics. Part of the Soviet Union are now NATO states, and we wonder why Putin gets anxious when NATO starts saber rattling. I mean, I don't want to take the Russian side here, but this is the reason the Russians get so their paintings get in a twist really, really fast, because that blue-red line, I mean, if you look at a map from 1980 to 1995 to 2005 to the present, has moved eastward at a freakish pace. And the idea that Ukraine could be an EU member and possibly even a NATO member, you would have theoretically German tanks with black crosses on them in the streets of Kharkov. There are people in the Soviet Union that have really bad memories of that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's not hit that too hard on the hammer. So, or let's not hit that nail too hard. But that's why these people get, or that's part of the reason why these people get so.
Because there's still quite a few people that remember those times. So.
And the idea of Soviet Union, what used to be a Soviet, parts of the Soviet Union are now actually in NATO.
Yeah.
And German tanks, American tanks, British helicopters are now in Poland, in Estonia, and Lithuania. That freaks people out over there in a big, big way. And of course, there's other factors. But that's where stuff like NORTHAG could. I don't want to say it, but that's where that possibility comes from. Is that tension?
So you could almost do the what ifs now. You could use these rules to do what ifs. So, taking a quick look at the rules, I just wanted to highlight one of the paragraphs on the page that's on the screen right now, and that's the last paragraph on page 6. It briefly just says that this is a new game. While players who've played Battle Group for World War II will find a lot of things they recognize, there's a lot of things that are different. Different feel character to the tabletop, speed up play for new, slightly larger scale games, which we'll talk about in a bit. And then outside of conventional battles, you're going to have electronic warfare, reliance on air assets. Could be chemical, nuclear, biological warfare. Air defense is up. So a lot of those factors that you didn't really see in World War II are now in play, so it creates a whole new game. So I'm really
I remember he
about
was
that.
talking. It's a larger, like, battle group was usually platoon, maybe company, and then if you really want to get ambitious with the team play, you might be able to squeeze out a battalion.
Yeah.
But that would be like with like a team of like 4 or 5 players on each side of the table. I think we're talking with Pierce earlier in our earlier episode. He was like, "Okay, we're going to start at company, battalion, and then maybe our work our way up from there." So it's bigger games, but the end the scale is down to 10 millimeter.
Yeah.
Which is one pretty important thing we should probably mention.
Jay, if you dropped it to page 10.
Yep. Go ahead.
On there, it's on about air basing, which is interesting. Talking about basing that a bit,
Why don't you hit on it, Ralph? Bring us through
So
it.
he's got notes on basing. How infantry is based doesn't really have much of an impact in the game. So a base can be 2, 3, or 4 men, and basically a team, when it's damaged, is either combat effective or combat ineffective. And if it's ineffective, it's removed, but doesn't necessarily mean everybody on the base is dead. And then he's got notes in that section on notes on a unit, company, unit, a platoon, and a company. So he's got a description of what it means by that. Yeah.
Yep.
And then he's talking about sizes. Of course, we know that PSG are doing 10 millimeter miniatures to go with this. But if someone's got this book and it has a bunch of Team Yankee miniatures, it's written for 10 or 15 mil.
Yep.
Which is interesting. So you could pick up your Team Yankee and use them. And then he's on about game sizes, and what's interesting, they've got a points cost and a table size. So if you look at the very bottom of that page, down about a platoon is 500 points to be done on a 6x4 table.
Yep.
Then you go to company, which is 750 points on a 6x6 or 6x8. And then he's talking 1,000 point games, which is battalion level on a 10x6 or larger.
Yeah. Also, if you noticed on his notes on the sizes of the miniatures used, besides the 10 mil and the 15, he does talk about it can be played easily with 6 mil micro armor with no changes at all. If anything, the ranges become more realistic. And then they go on to say 20 mil and 28 can be played if you have the space to do so. Obviously, you need larger battlefields. And if you find the ranges too small, they tell you how to adjust for ranges. So that's why I'm printing 6 mil, just to see how it plays out at that range, saying that it's going to be more realistic. And I know we've talked about that many a times about ranges and, scale size. So I like how they address that in this book as well. And I like how they do the game size and the recommended minimum size table. So.
Oh, yeah. Can I quickly just say something
course.
about that? Dear God, thank you for putting in how big the table should be. Is this just me? Am I just stupid? Because I have the last 4 or 5 miniature game rules I've read. They don't tell you how big the table should be. No. Now, I know they want to leave it kind of open because they don't want to be restrictive. They want to keep it kind of agnostic or whatever. But at least give us a hint.
Yeah.
As far as how big your table should be, because otherwise you have no idea. Like I had a big problem with that with the Air Wars C-21. The first table I played, the planes, like literally your first movement phase, they're almost colliding because my table was nowhere near big enough. I'm like, God damn it, tell me how big the table should be, or at least give me like a range. And again, so huge thanks for that. I know it's a small detail, but it's kind of important. The table's like the biggest thing in your game is literally your game, and then also. This is something about this company's always done is been sort of aimed at a certain scale, but at the same time made very, very easy accommodations to be kind of scale agnostic. Usually click up one level or down one level. Battle Group was mostly written for 20 mil, but you could do it in 28 or 15. I always played it in 15, and now we have here we have 10, and it's like okay, but you can also play it in 6. And you can also play it in 15. And I'm with you, G. Whenever I play almost any miniature game, I'm not usually a huge miniatures guy, but when I do, I feel like the beer commercial guy. I don't always drink beer, but when I do, but whenever I actually play a miniatures game, it's always okay. What scale is it written for? Okay, click down one.
Yeah.
This is a 28 millimeter game. I'm going to play it in 15 or 20. Yeah. This is a 10 millimeter game. I'm going to play it in 6.
So, that's really nice. Let's catch up on some comments from people that are joining us. Skoback says, I have only seen table size and Cruel Seas from Warlord and Battle Group. I thought Bolt Action gives you a play field size. Does it not? It's been so long since I've played.
I think in a lot of games it's actually in the scenario. More than it's in the core rule set.
Okay.
So the scenario often dictates it.
Okay. Doesn't Team Yankee, isn't it, Jim? Correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm wrong a lot, but isn't Team Yankee a 4x4 play field typically?
It was at the Team Yankee boot camp that we attended.
Okay.
Those tables were admitted to be a little small.
Yeah.
I think it's normally 4x6.
Okay. All right. Piotr says Poland was never a Soviet republic, and then he said that's true. The table size should be provided. So. But
okay, wait. What was that? What was the first part of that?
Poland was never a Soviet republic.
I don't think I ever said it was. If I said it was, I do apologize.
Yeah.
Poland was definitely a member of the Warsaw Pact, but I was kind of mentioning Ukraine, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, all in like the same sentence. So Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Ukraine, definitely Soviet republics. Poland, definitely not. That said, in those days, Poland was part and parcel of Warsaw Pact, and a huge staging ground for, again, a northern group of Soviet forces. That's like the reserve for a group of Soviet forces in Germany.
Yeah.
So not a member of, not a Soviet republic, but probably one of the biggest non-Soviet members of Warsaw Pact.
Yeah. Then he goes on to say a 4x4 is a car park, and we definitely experienced that at the Team Yankee boot camp when you had the Soviet army on there. I mean, it was just tanks everywhere, and you had no room to maneuver. It was basically you were just shooting at each other across the table.
I set up my 6 Hind gunships, which are gorgeous, but I set up those 6 Hind gunships on my 4-foot table. The rotors on those things are like 17 inches across.
Yeah.
So they literally did not have room to set them up in a row.
Yeah.
they were like the rotors were like interleaved with each other. Like, yeah, I could totally see this happening. Maybe they're at different altitudes or something. But yeah, it was.
Yeah.
But again, it's a great event, and they wanted to have as many.
It was
people
fun.
That they
It
had
was a
there.
lot of fun.
Oh God, that was awesome.
Yeah.
And again, I that's still one of my favorite interviews with you, G. It was the first interview I ever did with you.
Oh.
You and me and Bruce Lee did an episode, and the first question you asked us was, why Ariskini? Why did you play the Soviets? I said 6 Hind gunships. And yeah, but why? I said 6 Hind gunships, and you said fine for giving me a stupid answer. You turned over to Bruce Lee. You threw over to Bruce and you say, so why did you pick the Soviets? He's like, if I'm being honest, the exact same reason. 6 Hind gunships.
Uh-huh. All right. So, okay. So I wanted to look at the preset orders. What I like, and again, I have not played Battle Group, so I don't know if this is a change from Battle Group World War II to this edition, but you have an option when you're doing your orders to either do a preset based on platoon, company, battalion size, or you can roll D6 dice and add your officers to your roll to determine how many orders you are able to play.
Hello.
Go ahead.
How can we have that, G, as well? PS has joined us.
Oh, hey!
Eventually.
Welcome.
Super quick, just to answer that question. In Battle Group, it used to be the 2-6, 3d6, 4d6, but what most players were doing was just kind of, I have, the average roll on 2d6 is 7. The average roll on 3d6 is a 10.5, just round it up to 11. You pretty much would just grab, a number, and you would use that. So I think this is the rule set sort of like saying, this is how a lot of people are playing the game. Let's just go ahead and include that as a rule.
So I like you have the option
addition
of choosing either way, doing the preset or doing dice roll. I think it gives a little bit of a fog of war. Is there a communication breakdown if you do the dice roll versus presets? So I think that's really interesting option.
This is one of those rules that looks, when you read it and you haven't played the game, looks really random. It really isn't. Because it's your most games are going to be company. So it's company is 3d6 plus officers. You usually have like 4 or 5 officers. So what's your range really? I mean, it's a lot less random than it sounds.
Yeah.
But again, the preset orders is a great addition.
Awesome. Piers, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining us.
Eventually, yeah.
And I have to say, once we got the link to download the book and we've been reading through it, I'm like, oh yeah. So I know I'm still waiting on my, models to come in, but in the meantime, I've been printing off some 6mm forces to give it a play test. So I'm really excited about that. And we were just talking, I don't know if you caught it or not, but we were talking how we liked that you mentioned the different scale sizes and table sizes based on the army size, whether it's platoon, company, or battalion. So we like that you include all those things in the book.
Yeah. Well, it works at any scale, really. Yeah. It's kind of aimed for 6mm and 10mm and 15mm. And I guess you could play it in 20mm, but you'd want a fairly big table, I think. Because that's just the way the tanks are arranged, because you buy them in groups of 10 for the Russians, so 10 20mm tanks just takes up a lot of space, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Although I'm sure somebody will do it in 28mm. Just wait and see.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah. So, but it's it's finally nice to see it finished, as it were.
I'm just impressed with the photography that you do in, all your stuff, but just, I'm just looking at some Soviet armor here on a picture you got coming down a country road and, in through a field and a hind in the background. Are all the models we're seeing in the picture going to be the models that people will be receiving, or are these like private collection?
I think the only vehicles might be the chieftains, might be the only ones that are actually the PSE ones, because PSE just hadn't got stuff made when we had to do the photos, because we were so sort of out of sync with the book being done, and then PSE trying to get models made, that most of the stuff you see in the book is 10mm from Warwick's and my collections, and it's mainly timecast and minifigs with a few Pendragon bits here and there.
Okay.
But no, they're interesting to photograph as well, because it's something new for us to go down such a scale, because obviously all the battle group books are photographed with 20mm models. So it took us a little bit of time to work out how to photograph something a lot smaller.
I love the depth of field in that photograph. That's something that's really tough to do on a table.
Yeah, well, that's Warwick. He's got a knack for depth of field. You know, he's got quite good at it now. He's done quite a few photos.
So we were just reviewing the book, and just starting off, and Jim has played Battle Group quite a bit, and I haven't had that much opportunity to. So we were just doing comparisons and contrasts, and just talking about that this rule set, even though it's set in the 80s, could still be used today in some theories, with modern NATO exercises, and the what ifs, if it was, Poland or things like that. So. Yeah,
I mean, the aim of the book was to be something similar to Battle Group, but it's kind of evolved into a slightly different game, I suppose. There's a lot of similarities. Anybody that's played Battle Group will certainly notice the similarities, but they'll probably also have a bit of a hard time at first getting their head around the differences, because it feels so familiar. You assume certain things, and I noticed it when we did play testing, is that you because you're so used to playing Battle Group, you just assume that the answer to the query that you've got in your head at the time when you're play testing was the Battle Group answer, but certain things are slightly different. So Battle Group players will find it very easy to get into, and then they'll sort of pick up all these little nuances that are different. Things like the fire orders, you only fire once per turn. The objectives are slightly different. So there's all little bits and pieces like that scattered through it that have been sort of changed to get a better feel for the time period, and also allow the game to be sort of stepped up in the amount of forces being used, because really the NORTHAG forces are a sort of scale above where most Battle Group games would be on an average, because whereas in Battle Group you might have a platoon or two platoons of infantry and some support, the whole focus of NORTHAG really is around the sort of company sized engagement. So it's a couple of companies of tanks and a couple of platoons or three platoons or a full company of infantry being used by the Russians, so it's a little order of magnitude bigger. So the rules are slightly changed to cope with that, because if you'd taken basic Battle Group mechanics and tried to use it for 20-30 tanks at a time on a table, you'd be playing it for a day and a half probably.
Yeah, I get that.
One thing we were talking about in some of the earlier writing, or I think it was for Team Yankee at the time, but is how different World War III would have been from World War II. In obviously all the technology is very different, but how unprepared everybody was for World War II. Obviously the Allies were all unprepared. The Germans were woefully unprepared. They expected that war to kick off in the mid-40s. They had to invade Poland with not mostly, but with a significant number of tanks they stole from the Czechs. I mean, it was terrible. They were still using Mark I's and all the stuff like that. World War III in the 1980s, everyone has been gearing up for 40 years, and in World War III, the intensity, even leaving out nukes and chemical weapons and all that crazy stuff, just conventional forces on the ground, the intensity that World War III would have hit on Germany is. Yeah. Add a couple zeros. Never mind the technology, just the numbers, how much ammo everybody had. I mean, everyone was pouring billions of dollars a year into this for 40 years. And the expenditures were, I've seen numbers, something like World War III in Central Europe would have cost $1 trillion a day. It would have been absolutely astronomical as far as, so this is where, Battle Group, I should say, NORTHAG almost doesn't have a choice. It has to click up at least one level on the echelon ladder. where you're playing on the company and battalion level instead of at the platoon and company level. You have to take that staircase, at least one, because there's no skirmishing in Germany in 1980s, that's for sure.
No. So we have a question from one of the people on the chat, and Piotr is asking, when will it be available for wider public purchase, because he missed out on the pre-order?
Good question. It was due to be released at Salute on the 18th.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, as far as I know, PSC was still aiming for the 18th, and that they were aiming for that up until 2 weeks ago, when the UK lockdown started for virus thingies, and they're slightly. I don't think they have a release date yet. They're still aiming for the mid-April, but I suspect they've had to go down to only one person in their factory, so obviously their production of the Sirecast molds and models has slowed down, because they can only have one person at a time in the entire premises now due to the working restrictions. And the printers have got the book and it's being printed, but the printers, again, they also have to reduce their staff to make sure they've got this social distancing and everything. So they're not sure. Last time I spoke to them last week, they, as I say, they're still aiming for April, mid-April, this sort of 18th, 19th. I suspect it will probably slip back maybe towards the end of April, maybe into May. But I can't see it being any longer than that, because, as I say, the book's already being printed. Pretty much all the models that are on the pre-order, certainly all their master molds are made. And I think the British infantry and maybe a couple of smaller vehicles, pretty much everything else is being produced to build the stock up to send out to the backers. And then obviously they'll have to then build up stock again for the retail release. So I suspect it'll be towards the end of April, beginning of May.
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be that long. I mean, I know PSC are quite keen to get it out, because obviously from their point of view, I don't know if you know, PSC's has their hard plastics produced at another factory. They don't do it in-house. And that factory's closed down because of this COVID-19 stuff. So obviously the only new releases that PSC have got are stuff that they can do in-house. So NORTHAG is one of those things that's sort of going to be its main release, really, to get it through this spell over the summer. So I know they're pretty keen to get it out and get people playing it, you know. So yeah, I suspect end of April, beginning of May for retail release. The backers, obviously, they'll get their books and their models probably a week or two before then, so shouldn't be too long, really, I don't think.
Well,
But,
I'm excited. I cannot wait. So I'm really looking forward to it.
it's it's nice to have a Cold War game that feels a bit different to just playing World War II with different tanks.
Yeah,
you know,
I got you on that one.
Yeah.
I think that's the key thing is it does feel different to playing Battle Group World War II. I think what people will find is once they've played it, they're going to want a World War II version of this to play much bigger World War II games. You know, so we're kind of looking at that. I've been talking to PSC about that, and PSC are going to do some 10mm plastic tanks to see if it's viable that we can bash out a load of 10mm tanks, and then obviously if we can produce the tanks for it, then maybe we'll do some rules for it. You know, because there's nice things in the system that you can see. I think one of the things every person who plays World War II Battle Group will instantly steal from NORTHAG is the new way objectives work, which is things like you have vital objectives that are worth more points, and then you have like home objectives and you're in your baseline and the enemy's baseline. They're all staggered at different chip values.
Mm-hmm.
So it plays very differently because of that, and it also makes objectives very key on the battlefield to a player, because you can play a turn with just an objectives that you could force your opponent to take upwards of 4 or 5, maybe even 6 or 7 chits in a turn, which is quite a lot if you
I was
play.
going to say that the objective system is going to I haven't read the rules yet, but it sounds like it would click into the battle rating counter system.
Yeah, it will. The only slight difference is the armies, because they're bigger in NORTHAG, have bigger BR. So their battle rating is that bit bigger. So they can take quite a few chips before they start to worry. So you'd probably tweak it a little bit, but yeah, I mean, it's like anything in battle group. It will drop right in. And to be honest, that idea with objectives came from some of the historical scenarios that we've written for battle group, where certain objectives are worth more chits than another. So it all cross pollinates from one to the other, really. So yeah, I think people will take that and use it in World War II, and there'll probably be other little bits and pieces. Maybe not the bit about nuclear weapons, but the other bits.
Yeah. Pierce, can you explain the platoon orders versus the company orders rule a little bit? I know, because I'm looking at the company orders and it says Warsaw Pact only, and then platoon orders are NATO and Warsaw Pact. Is that kind of your answer to the Soviet, what did we call it, the tide of?
Yeah, we kind of. I think one of the issues we had with how the Russians worked is they're always portrayed as they're a conscript force, and they're always portrayed as pretty much quite useless and only able to adopt this sort of human wave kind of thing, And when we've looked at stuff and read different bits and pieces, we kind of could see that, but also they should have the ability to be more nuanced and actually be able to fight quite a sophisticated battle, because the Russians did at the end of World War II, and you can see that they've evolved slightly to where they are in this Cold War period, and obviously the Russians are held back by the quality of their troops, and the company order thing is just that. It allows a Warsaw Pact player to issue a large number of orders an order to an entire tank company at the cost of a lot less orders than it would be to each tank individually. So instead of it costing you 10 orders, it costs you like 4.
Okay.
But you're prescripted in what you can do. So you can either sort of rush forwards, or you can do this sort of advance and fire. So you can either get all your tanks storming forwards at full speed, or you can move them forward and then open fire. So it's quite good for the Russians just to sort of push themselves into a position. It becomes limiting in the fact that there's only certain things you can do. So you have to be very careful when you use it and when you don't use it, because it applies to the entire company. So you can't use it for like 8 of your tanks and say, I want to do something different with these. So you give the orders to the company. So it's good for crossing areas of ground when you've got a big flat German plane to cross, and the British are dug in on the other side. But when you're trying to negotiate a Russian tank company around an urban area, it becomes much more difficult to use the company orders. And then you have to start issuing orders individually in a Russian army, and that's when you notice the lack of Russian orders starts to come into play.
Oh, okay.
So the Russians in these big sort of sweeping advances can be very good and very fast, and use a lot less orders. But as soon as you get into this sort of nitty gritty close in fighting, where companies are split up and you want 3 of your T-64s to go and get that, and you want another 2 T-64s to go up that road and sweep around the back of that house, you then lose the ability to use these all-encompassing orders, and that's when the Russian sort of lack of orders compared to NATO will come into play. So the idea is that it reflects the fact that NATO is probably slightly better at these close-in initiative-based encounters where they'd be running into each other, and the Russians are able to do these big sweeping advances when they can, throw the whole company forward.
That's Soviet Army doctrine, especially back in the 80s. It's a difference not only in the quality of the troops, but even more importantly, NCOs and junior officers. Especially junior officers. You might notice this difference. A Soviet tank company is not run by a captain; it's run by a senior lieutenant. And then a Soviet captain doesn't command a company; he's the XO of a battalion, and the battalion commander is only a major in most units or whatever. And so you wind up with times and situations where the Soviets don't have. I mean, their soldiers are. I mean, they're like usually 2-year conscripts. But honestly, back in the 80s, a lot of American and other NATO forces were only slightly better than that. I think the real difference is, and this is what the game does. It sounds like it does really, really well. Is that difference in the quality of what's the word here? Field grade officers, company and field grade officers, lieutenants, captains, majors, lieutenant colonels.
Yeah, that's where the difference is. It's trying to reflect that leadership differently, sort of almost difference between professional officers and that sort of more amateur officer, or certainly the officer who doesn't quite have as much training as the other side. So the NATO forces are a lot more flexible, but there's a lot less of them. And the Russians the Soviets are much more at their best when they're used en masse. But once you start getting into the nitty-gritty of engagements, they can suffer from a lack of orders. But again, that's also offset about what you guys were talking about with the option to pre-select a certain amount of orders instead of rolling for it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can balance things out. The idea is to give players a way of. It's whether you risk it rolling for the dice and hopefully getting loads, or if you take the safe option and bank some orders.
One of the best, or maybe optimistic is the best word. One of the most optimistic, one of the best views I've seen of how the Soviet army would have actually behaved in the 1980s is from one of the best, I think, Third World War novel ever written, Ralph Peters' Red Army. Absolute. You are not allowed to play any of these games, everybody, until you've read Red Army at least once. New rule from Riskin.
Yeah, if you're going to read one sort of fictionalized novel of a Cold War battle, then read Ralph Peters' book, because the rest of them are okay, but his is pretty much an actual battle. It's really cool.
It's absolutely best. But even this goes to what you were saying a second ago, Pierce. If you read his afterword, he's like, this book gives the Soviet army a lot of credit. The Soviet army thinks really well in big pictures. Yeah. It looks at a map and it says, we're going here, and it draws these huge, like, 2nd Guards Tank Army, 20th Tank Army. We're going to be in Hamburg by the end of day 2. We're going to be at the Rhine at the end of day 4, or whatever. And the exact phrase he uses, however, is there's a certain problem with the Soviet army when it hits the what's the word? The actual phrase he uses is where the rubber meets the road. Yeah. When you get down to muzzle, and now you're in the fluid and chaos of combat, that lack of flexibility training, independent training, encouragement and independent thought and reaction in the fluid of combat is where the Soviet army really starts to fall apart. That's just where they have a problem. And again, that's where, okay, you were doing great until the shooting started, until it got thick. And now we can't really use those company orders that much anymore. Now I have to everyone is kind of in their own little battle, in their own little tank turret. And now, holy shit, I don't have nearly enough orders because welcome to the Soviet army. And I think that's what is the key difference with NORTHAG to most Cold War rules is the way Battle Group and those sort of mechanics, they allow us to do things like that. They allow us to have two armies that can fight each other, but both fight in a completely different manner. And there's not many rule systems that really reflect that properly, I don't think, or at least try and reflect it. Granted, it's abstracted into you guys rolling the dice and getting the orders, but the company orders thing and then the platoon orders that NATO can use, and NATO having the extra officers does give you that balance between, as you say, between this sort of big set piece force that suddenly falls apart when it's trying to do something reacting to things actually happening, compared to NATO, which doesn't so much go in for the big picture but can fight nitty gritty when the shit hits the fan, as it were.
So I was looking over some of the rules. I like the engineer order. I think that's really interesting. It adds a little bit more than just let's go out and kill each other. I think there's some really good recovery in here, repair. So you can do a lot more than just straight up combat. I like the movement on there. I like your rule on the jet aircraft. There's no movement distance. It just enters and leaves the table in the same turn. Obviously that's a really good one.
Yeah, I mean, most of the stuff is very similar to Battle Group, but obviously we've had to change bits and pieces, especially air power, because it's much different, obviously, compared to World War II, because one of the things that was really a sticking point for us was getting helicopters in, and how we reflected their use on the tabletops. So because it's the fast air is fairly easy. It just arrives, drops a bomb, and buggers off. It's not going to hang around. Whereas a helicopter it's more like a flying tank than an aircraft. It's there and it can hang around, right, only until it's used its payload up. But it's a much more offensive and reactive weapon.
Yeah.
But it flies about the place. So there was quite a balance to be made between when we first started playtesting. The Hinds were just hideous. They just turn up and kill everything on the table, and you'd be like, right. So we had to tone those down a little bit, but it adds another dynamic. It adds an aerial dynamic to the game, which you don't really get in Battle Group as much.
As far as air power goes, that's really only going to be the only major difference, I think, especially in other game systems as well. I mean, whether or not you're flying a MiG-17, a MiG-21, or a MiG-3 in 1942 or whatever, yeah, it shows up, it drops something, it hits or misses. Maybe it has to take AA fire if you have AA units on the table before that. Helicopters, though, they're basically APCs that get to ignore terrain. They can even drop off troops in some cases. So, and then as Hinds go, they're scary, but they tend to be scary for one turn. At least in most systems. After that, they've got that chain gun or whatever. They're not exactly hard to hit. They've got some armor on them, but most of their weapons are pretty close. So NATO players take at least some anti-aircraft, please. Take some autocannons.
I think take quite a bit of anti-aircraft, as we found out when we didn't bother. We've had games like that where I didn't bother taking any anti-aircraft weapons for my Russians, and in the first 5 turns I had 3 Lynx helicopters turn up. So
Oh, for the Soviets, good grief! I mean, how many anti-air systems do they have?
I know. Well,
the 57-2, the 23-4, the 36 missiles. I can't even count. It would be half the podcast listing their anti-aircraft. Soviets are very, very afraid of our aircraft.
I wanted more tanks. So I less.
So, you did mention that it was mentioned in the book about make sure you bring anti-air. I like how you address auto cannons and man pads. One thing that stuck to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have a rule for flamethrowers. Are we still using flamethrowers in the 80s?
There's some vehicle ones. The Russians have got some vehicle mounted ones.
Okay.
So there's a couple, not many.
Okay.
Not many. But, and the NATO has some pretty nasty air delivered weapons as well. And some pretty hideous artillery delivered munitions. You can dump minefields in front of the Russians.
I've done that.
By your artillery, stuff like that. So it's there's lots of different bits and pieces in it that I think people are going to have quite a bit of fun trying out. And lists will become. I think people will suddenly find, rather than writing these killer lists, they'll write lists to try different things to get one over on their opponent. Which I think will be a lot of fun for people.
Oh, yeah.
And it's different. And there's vehicles that do other things as well. You've got the electronic warfare vehicles that will try and knacker up your opponent's dice rolls for the next turn and things like that. So it's it's all very abstracted into quite a gamey mechanic, but it's also in there so that you know, there's a reason to have the models on the table. Same with Battlegroup. You know, we like everything to have a purpose.
I
And
suppose those flamethrowers will be useful for those that dug in infantry.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like I dig everything in whenever I'm playing North. My Russians just start dug in and they don't really go anywhere. To be honest. And the other thing that I've found different with NORTHAG is reconnaissance troops. There's a real use of recce now. It actually becomes something that you really want to take and has a use, because a lot of objectives now you can assign them to only be captured by infantry or reconnaissance units. So you may have these big Russian tank companies that can go steep, but they may be able to secure you any objectives doing it. So infantry and recce can be very useful in probing these areas and objectives that are sort of further away and capturing things. So it's nice that everything really does have a purpose, you know.
That's a really neat addition, because I mean, tanks are fantastic at taking ground. They're not so good at holding it. They're terrible at holding it. Tanks are like the worst defensive weapon on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And as far as recon goes, or recce goes, I remember in Battle Group, the rule was basically whoever had more reconnaissance units, scout units, started off out scouting the enemy, and so the enemy had to draw like one battle rate encounter at the beginning of the game. Then after that, it was like, I guess it has a 20mm autocannon.
Exactly.
You know, you're like, okay, I guess it's still kind of useful.
Yeah.
But this sounds great, actually.
And also I think when you're playing the smaller scales, your board's that much bigger, so you find a use for these slightly faster moving reconnaissance units to nip off to sides of the battle where, you know, there's not so many people lurking around an objective, and it's nice because it makes you really think about how you're structuring your force, and because forces are built in a completely different way to Battle Group with the forward screen and the main force, you can find yourself really heavily loading your forward screen with offensive units and recce in order to try and sort of grab as many objectives as you can, with enough stuff to sort of dig in and hold those objectives as the enemy's main force arrives. Of course, the real stealer of objectives is the born infantry platoon that you can helicopter in the reinforcement.
All right, everyone pause for G. Go ahead, G.
Yes.
There it is.
There it is.
Yeah, that's another reason to always have AA, because the last thing you want in the last few turns of the game is a full platoon of Soviet airborne suddenly being helicoptered in onto your main objective right on your baseline and just all piling out and taking
Admittedly,
it.
I certainly haven't played Battle Group yet. I'm sorry, I'm NORTHAG yet. But Battle Group, I remember making up a lot of lists where it's like, okay, this is the scenario. This is what I'm trying to do. I need these engineers. I need this air defense. I need. You have to start with a certain number of infantry units, you know, depending on the level of your game, so on and so on and so on. And then at the end, going, okay, how much do I have left for tanks? Tanks was always the last thing you bought. It's like, okay, that was the dessert at the end of your vegetables. So it's like, all right, I've eaten my lima beans and my asparagus and my broccoli. Now, here's the dessert or whatever. So, and that might sound restrictive to some players who aren't familiar with the system. Trust me, it's not. It's going to challenge you in so many ways, and you're going to end up with a balanced, multilateral force that has to do different things. And especially with the lethality of modern weapons, we were talking about this before you joined our call, is everything hits, everything dies. There's, you know, the lethality of a World War III army versus so anything you can do, reconnaissance so that you know where the enemy is before the enemy knows where you are, electronic warfare, any kind of engineers to give you, field fortifications, anything that allows your army to live one extra turn. You play almost defensively a lot, even if you're not on defense. Survivability, I guess, is maybe a better way to put it. It's definitely going to, because if your army is shooting for 1/2 of a turn more than the enemy's turn is, you're going to kill so much stuff in that extra turn, 2 turns, that might probably give, that's probably going to give you the game.
Yeah, I mean, NORTHAG does have a lot more tanks in it than a battle group game generally. But well, I tend to play the Soviets most of the time, so I have a lot of tanks. But they do tend to die quite quickly, so I kind of need lots of tanks. So, I mean, in most of the games, I very rarely have less than 20 T64s, or T80s, and you need them because you have to close with the NATO tanks, because the NATO tanks, they're better at hitting you, they're better at spotting you, and if you get hit by one of them, it's pretty much game over, at any range on the table. So, when you're advancing in these company formations, you're looking at the terrain and thinking, right, well, I'm going to lose probably 4 tanks in this first advance, and then second turn I'll lose probably 2 or 3 there. So you, as a Russian player, you sort of think, well, my first tank company is probably all going to get destroyed, but I may take out 2 of those chieftains.
Yeah.
So at least your second tank company will take out the next 2 chieftains.
It's like Longstreet says in Gettysburg. It's a depressing mathematical equation.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's X distance divided by number of units divided by enemy firepower quotient, time divided by killing power divided by survival. Oh man, I'm already dead.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, it's all down to the vagaries of the dice as well, though. So we've had those games where NATO haven't managed to hit anything. As well as I've charged across, and then it's been over very quickly. Once the Russian big guns get in close, they can make quite a mess of NATO tanks up close.
That's an almost ending game. Once the Soviets get within choking distance, you better have killed most of them, because now it's their game.
It is, but as a NATO player, you have to play like NATO, so you have to have a multi-layered defence. Mm-hmm. So you have to use your infantry to back up the tanks with their handheld anti-tank weapons, and you've got to have like the lighter vehicles with their anti-tank guided missiles and things like that. So you need to plan your force out so that you're hitting that Russian tank company as it comes in with all different things at all different ranges. So your chieftains really are sort of at the back on a hill. In front of them are things like swing fires and Milans, and then in front of them is the dug-in infantry with Carl Gustafs and Laws and things like that. And the idea is you try and hit them with as much as it rolls in. And obviously, if you're lucky, you'll have a couple of helicopters that tend to really ruin tanks' day, but.
Yeah. Gaz, are you still alive?
Yeah, I'm still here.
You're very quiet. I thought you'd be all over this. We're talking about the British and all that.
Yeah, I know the links well. I worked on it for quite a few years, so I know how bad it is.
So I wanted to mention something that sticks out to me as a former NBC sergeant for my company. You have rules regarding NBC. Obviously, nuclear and chemical, biological, you address really well, saying that it's a long-term solution. But can you hit on those a little bit? Explain those, how people will play nuclear and chemical.
Yeah, It's not much of a game after the nuke one, but yeah. What it is basically there's chits in the pot. One of them is a mushroom cloud, which is your nuke chit, and another one is a gas chit. And they do what they say on the chits, but they'll only do it if you've taken certain options for your army list. Uh-huh. So if you've taken, I think it's what is it? Vital ground, I think it is for the for the players, and that allows basically the idea is that this battle space is so vital that rather than lose and give it up, you'll nuke it. So you have to have purchased that in your army list. You've got to fulfill the other requirements, and you've got to pull that chit. So if you pull the nuke chit and you don't have the bit from the army list for vital ground, then it does nothing. And it's the same with gas. You've got to have clearance. You've got to have purchased on the army list clearance to use chemical weapons. So you need to plan it from the start what you're going to do.
Gotcha.
Now, so once you've done that, then if you draw the chit, you can hold on to it and use it when you want to use it. So you can throw it out. Obviously, with a nuke, you're pretty much deciding the game's going to be a draw. Really, it's the battle group equivalent of a table flip. But what happens with a nuke is you do literally drop a small tactical nuclear warhead onto the battlefield.
Okay.
And you basically roll to see if anybody actually survives it. And for everything destroyed, you take chits. And you take it one after the other. So if somebody drops a nuke, you literally both sit there rolling for a unit. It's destroyed, take a chit, and away you go. And it's whoever breaks first. Although, as we say, it's pretty much a non-event for both sides.
Yeah.
Gas is slightly different. Gas, you can once you deploy the chemical weapons, troops do have the chance to get into their NBC suits and carry on fighting.
Okay.
And then there's penalties for fighting whilst buttoned up in tanks and whilst wearing all the NBC gear.
Mop level 4. Gee, you remember that?
I actually did. You're not on Facebook, so if you were on Facebook, Jim, you would see that I have my M17 mask that I just brought out of storage. That's going to work with me, and I just got a new mop suit, still in vacuum packaging, that I'm taking to work with me. So I'm going to be in full mop 4.
Mop 4.
Yeah, I need
military
one.
Operational preparedness posture, or Mop 4. It's
mission-oriented protective posture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if this might be slightly off topic as far as, I mean, I'm sure the game, again, I haven't read the rules, so I can't really speak to the game. But like people have asked a lot of times, even back in the old Team Yankee days or whatever, is how, okay, nukes. Oh, well, that's, how do you use nukes in a World War III game? GDW Assault used to do this. And how do you use chemical weapons? The Soviet doctrine kind of used to be, it's possible to, on an operational level, to open up a gap on the line with a small tactical nuke, like anywhere from 20 to 300 kilotons, pretty much 20, but anyway. And then advance through that gap with NBC hardened vehicles or whatever. So a lot of it, okay, if you want to play a Third World War nuclear game, again, I have no idea about NORTHAG or whatever. A lot of times for a nuke, it's okay, the nuke has already gone off and now you're going to fight in this irradiated wasteland or whatever, as NATO tries to plug the breach. As far as chemical weapons go, you've got stuff like that old Soviet sarin nerve gas that kills you in 9 seconds if you don't have your stuff on or whatever. But it breaks down and becomes pretty much, by design, inert in like 30 minutes. So who knows if it would have worked, but the Soviet idea was to drop a bunch of this stuff on a particular advanced corridor that they felt was particularly important, kill as much as they can, and then while the shock of that was still wearing off, advance over it with their chemical troops. I mean, in the height of the Cold War, in the mid-'80s, Soviet chemical regiments outnumbered all NATO, never mind American, never mind British, all NATO chemical warfare troops by a factor of like 10 to 1. They were bringing chemical weapons to the table. So that was not even an issue. They had already made that decision. That wasn't going to be a call they made on day 3. They were like, here we go. The ball's gone up. We're dropping the sarin. Here it comes.
Yeah, and I think that's why we put in the chemical stuff, the gas, and all that is you are able to use it, as part of your sort of tools for the job, as it were. The tactical nuke thing is more us having a bit of fun, really.
It's pretty much when the game is pretty much over and it's a last ditch up. It's the final solution, right?
Yes, exactly. It's just to really annoy the person you're playing against more than anything. Just to make.
If I can't win this game, nobody's winning this game.
Hence the table flip.
Neither are you. Yeah.
So, Piers, I have one question for you.
Yeah,
as far as the chemical, is there a special rule that the person who's getting the chemical attack against, do they have to yell gas, gas, gas? If they don't, they lose their commander.
Only if you want to. Yeah.
I say the rule should be that you actually have to put on the gas mask and play the rest of the game at the table.
And how quickly do you have to put the gas mask on, Jim? What was it?
9 seconds.
9 seconds.
9 seconds.
Well, we're quite lucky because some of the people play with produce enough of their own deaths to make it quite realistic. So,
All right, so let's talk.
Order Mexican food again, right?
Let's talk about the most important section in this book, Gaz.
Oh,
Helicopters.
Helicopters. So they talk about. They show the links because obviously we're talking, NORTHAG, so it's the British
Mark 7.
Army. So and is that the only helicopter that's available to the British at this time period?
Yeah, Gazelles.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a few other bits and pieces, but the main
Right.
sort of combat one is the links for them in this.
Yeah, that's right. Scout was still around, but it was pretty much obsolete at that point.
Okay. Was that a troop transport helicopter as well as an attack at that time?
So Lynx has a single 6-seat in the back and then a rear 3-seat behind that. It can supposedly carry 9 soldiers, but in reality, once with kit in there, you're probably looking at more like 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a reasonable aircraft. It was quite fast for its day, although it did have the world record. I've seen that aircraft. It had all the rivets skimmed smooth, and it was purpose built to break the speed record rather than just a run-of-the-mill one.
Oh, really?
Not much protection, so GRP predominantly. No armor plating except for the seats, and that's only for pilot, co-pilot. Tow system, limited vision tow missile launcher, top left. It pretty much had probably a little over 180-degree arc. Missiles, I don't remember the exact range. I want to say 2 to 4K. It obviously runs a wire, being a tow system, so they have to keep on target to hit. It's not a fire and forget. So yeah, it was a good bit of kit. It's quick, it's very maneuverable. It also has the ability to press itself into the ground with the collective, which made it very good for conversion for ship. So when you dump the collective in it on the ground, you can actually force it to push itself into the ground. So really good for doing a fast drop, because you can get close, pull collective hard, slam it in and lock the aircraft down, so the troops can literally just bundle straight out, dive to the ground, and then your skid's up and you're on your way.
Gotcha. All right. So survivability in the game, Piers. Are helicopters very vulnerable? Do they have a higher survivability rate?
You don't want to be in one getting hit by anything bigger than a bullet. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Especially
anything bigger than small arms fire?
Yeah, I mean, any of the missiles or anything like that will really ruin your day as a helicopter pilot.
Okay.
But the handy thing is, but especially with the links and things like that, is they can take cover as well. So you have an air asset that can also go and hide.
So okay.
So it's all balanced out with that. So they turn up on chits. So you have to pull a helicopter chit to be able to get one. But there's quite a few helicopter chits in the pot. So I think most games we've played, we've had at least one helicopter turn up. We've had some games where I've had 3 Hinds turn up in the space of a turn, which is quite scary. But they can be a real game changer, the helicopters, if you use them right, but they're very limited in the amount of ammunition they carry. So they are pretty much a sort of turn up for 2 or 3 turns, loose off their missiles and gear, and then vanish back the way they came.
Nice. Okay. I was just looking at some of the other aircraft rules. I like reconnaissance helicopter rules. Your timed airstrikes, I like that. It really adds to the game. I like you have a rule for cluster bombs.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
And I like how even the ones that after you've done all your hits and pins, that area becomes a minefield for the submunition. So it's not just I bombed it, it's used up, and then that's it. It's like now you have the ones that didn't hit anything are now basically a minefield. I think that's really cool. That really just changes the dynamic of the battlefield.
It does, yeah, and it allows you to sort of be offensive with blocking areas. So you can not only are you taking out a unit, you're also stopping people advancing through it later on.
Yeah,
and things like the rocket pods as well. The big rocket pods are just saturation weapons, and they're
You guys got to be
Hideous.
careful with that kind of stuff. Because, I mean, again, I haven't played NORTHAG yet, but I played GDW Assault back in the 80s. And I was a Soviet player with an artillery-delivered minefield. And it was like a core level asset, so I had to wait like 2 turns before the actual mission dropped after I made the call. You write down on a secret piece of paper like what hex numbers you were calling it in on, and then it can drift, and then this, and then that. Meanwhile, the battle was fluid. Long story short, take your shot. I went ahead and I called in an artillery-delivered minefield on myself. So I dropped it in on this town. It's a much bigger hex kind of game. I dropped it in on this town I was trying to take. I think it was the West Germans were my opponent. Something happened. They had to pull out. I kind of forgot where my mind, because again, it was 2 turns ago, and it's a big game. I went ahead. I moved in there with a understrength battalion of T-80s, and then I was like, "Oh, let me flip over my paper. I forgot I had artillery minefields coming in." He opened up the hatch, and there's like one of his own mines there on the side of the turret next to him. It was.
These things happen.
These things happen. And a super quick footnote, just for people in the audience or whatever. Just a quick question. Again, I haven't read the book yet. Are there any plans, or are they already in the book, for other nations in NORTHAG besides just the British? Because NORTHAG is not just the British. Okay.
Yeah. Well, the NORTHAG book is the rules,
Okay.
And the British Army, the Rhine list, and the Soviet motorized list are sort of giveaways with the rule book, if you like. So the idea is that those are to get people playing.
The Netherlands has a core in there. The Germans, the Belgians even have a core in there. So there's...
Yeah. So what follows NORTHAG is a book that's going to be called SITREP, which will cover that part, but it's basically going to be all the army lists.
Okay.
So it'll be a book of army lists for the period. So it will be NATO stuff like Belgians and West Germans. It'll be the West German Home Guard units. There'll be the different British units, so the follow-up forces that would have come across in Saxons and things like that. There'll be all the Warsaw Pact people like East Germans, Czechs, Poles, and there'll be Soviet naval infantry. So everybody will be going into that. So and the idea, the reason it was split down was because the book would have been so big, it would have been a massive hardback, and the way postal charges have gone over the last 2 or 3 years, it's costing us a lot of money to post out the big hardback battle group books. So the idea that PSC decided on was to have 2 smaller softback books, because it saves us so much money in postage.
I just remember when Team Yankee came out, people were talking about, oh, look at this, American file, American-centric. First of all, that's not what Team Yankee ever meant. But number 2, like as soon as, well, what about everybody else in NATO? So to kind of head off these questions, again, we got people, live in our stream or whatever.
Yeah.
NORTHAG, I mean, never mind all of NATO, just NORTHAG contains at least 3 or 4 other nations. I think the Canadians even had a brigade that might have been deployed there. So there's other nations in NORTHAG. I just don't want people to get confused with the name of the book being NORTHAG. And we keep mentioning, well, it's NORTHAG, so we're talking about the British. That's not necessarily, again, just for people in the chat, that's not necessarily true. And I just want, to bring up the question that other nations are going to be brought in.
Yeah,
I mean, SITREP sounds great. That's what I was waiting for, being the American. But even within NORTHAG, there's other nationalities.
Exactly. So I mean, the idea is that it's called SITREP, but to be honest, it's just a book of army lists, really.
Awesome.
So it's purely done to keep the cost of shipping this stuff to people down. Because one of the advantages of the new plastic, this injection plastic that PSC are using, is it is so light. So sort of 10 T80 tanks in this Sirecast they don't weigh much more than 1 or 2 metal 10mm tanks. So, it enables PSC to post the books and a couple of armies to people at a relatively cheap cost, which, in this day and age is a concern for us, because we find with a lot of people overseas, to get the battle group books, are relying on local shops to get them in, and get trade deals with PSC to get these books in. So we're trying to find a way where we can post them direct to people and keep the cost down. So the idea of splitting into 2 softbacks was to try and cover that. Also gives us time to test the different armies, because it took us long enough to get the British right and the Soviets right and the rules right, let alone, then add in another 10 different army lists to work out and paint up and all that stuff. So, but they will be there,
It also makes it easier to bring an army to convention or to an event. Anyone who's ever tried to bring a metal army through airport security, you have a lot of weird questions to answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Stick to plastic whenever you can.
And that's the nice thing about the 10 mil plastics that PSC are doing, is it has all the benefits of plastic, as in, it's light, it's cheap, but it also has flex to it. So where metal gun barrels on tanks would bend, the plastic ones flex, and that's that, and it's brilliant, because you don't have any paint chipping off models, which I don't know about you guys, but my metal tanks, whether they're 6 mil or 10 mil, always look like they're covered in glitter because there's so many little chips get knocked off.
Yeah.
And I keep them in foam trays, so it's not like they go anywhere, but I don't know what it is. So it's really nice to have these plastic ones. I'm just sort of going through. I got a whole big bag of the new plastics from PSC last week, so I'm just sorting out how I'm going to start replacing units, because you've got to have a couple of companies of T64s. So PSC have sent me a couple more companies of T64s to do up. So
you've got the models that people will be receiving.
Yeah.
What do you think? Give us,
I
what
think
should we
great.
be expecting?
I think they're fantastic.
Yeah?
To be honest, I think the beauty of them is because they're this sort of, the plastic has a very slight flex to it, and that's only on the gun barrels, obviously not on anything else. But the detail they're getting out of this plastic is phenomenal. It's as good as metals.
Oh wow!
And because you have this sort of flex, it means the thing I used to hate about 6 mil and 10 mil tanks was the barrels, because the barrels would always get bent, or they'd knock, or they'd snap off, and that just used to wind the crap out of me. And that's kind of why I sort of stopped playing those games, really. And with the new stuff, you can actually, the way I tested these tanks was I painted up a chieftain, and I bent the gun barrel to a sort of a 90-degree angle in the middle of it, and no paint came off.
Wow.
Now I wouldn't even think about doing that to a tank with a metal barrel.
Right.
So for actual just gaming use, these things are going to be fine. And the beauty of it is you can throw these things across the room and they just bounce. And the paint doesn't even chip off them. So they are, from the point of view for a war gamer, they are just great. Now, obviously, it's something new, so whether people will take to it, I don't know. But for 10 mil tanks, it's a dream, because you can, they're very quick to clean up. They tend to have the odd mold line here and there, but in 10 mil. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, there's a mold line on that," and I'm saying, yes, there is, but you've got to realise that you're looking on a computer screen of a 10 mil tank that's blown up to a massive size, so that you can pick out that mold line. I said, if you looked at that tank from 6 foot away on the other side of a table, you wouldn't see the mold line, because you probably couldn't see the bloody tank.
I was about to say you wouldn't be able to spot the tank if it was in terrain.
Exactly. So, it's. But they've worked really hard on it, so I really hope it's successful for them, because if it is, it's an absolute game changer in terms of miniatures, because the way they can produce this stuff and for the price they can produce it at will completely open up a whole manner of opportunities for PSC, because they're doing ancients, they're doing 50 mil ancients in this sire cast, and the detail they're getting in them is amazing. It's really good. So, if it takes off and people like it, then I imagine this time next year PSC will have, 15 mil Napoleonics. They'll have 50 mil Franco-Prussian. There'll be all this stuff they'll be able to do, because the production costs and the sculpting costs become that much cheaper because there's no steel molds for hard plastic.
Yeah.
So you're using silicon rubber molds for everything, so it becomes that bit more cheaper for them to do, so they can bring out lots and lots of stuff. I mean, just the amount of vehicles they're doing in sidecars for the British and the Russians must be, I think there's well over 50 or 60 models, I think, individual models going to be done.
I was just going to ask you, are they going to be doing models for every vehicle that's mentioned in the rulebook at this point that you're aware of?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So all the aircraft, jets, armor,
I don't know
everything?
I don't know about aircraft and jets and helicopters as yet. I've sent them the list for all the vehicles that are in the book.
Okay.
They've actually done most of them. I've just sent them the last few bits, so they are looking at doing every single vehicle, or at least a version of every single vehicle, so that everything you need from the army list you can get from PSC in straight away, or it's certainly in the next. I think the last wave is going for design. I think it went for design last week, so I imagine by the summer pretty much everything you need will be available from PSC. They are looking at doing helicopters and jets in scale.
Oh, wow.
They haven't decided yet whether they're going to or not, because I think the only reason they haven't decided is there's obviously the scale they've chosen, the 144th. There's an awful lot of plastic kits available.
Yeah.
And to be honest, a lot of the plastic kits are very good and very cheap. I mean, the Zevda produce a Hind in 144th, and you can buy it for like £4 or £5. And it's a fantastic kit. So I think part of what PSC are looking at is whether it's worth them investing the money when the product's already available for people to go and get quite cheaply.
Okay.
Obviously they'd like to sell it to everybody, but I think PSC realised they'd have to sell it for a significantly higher price than somebody may be able to go and pick up a plastic Hind from Zevda for. So PSC's option is, we'll just go and buy a load of Hinds off Zevda and let people buy them from us,
Gotcha.
rather than
That's actually a really good point, because a lot of these old World War II games are 15 mil. Flames of War is 15 mil, and for some reason, a lot of times these companies will produce aircraft for those games one scale level beneath it. So in a 15 millimeter game, you'll get 10 millimeter aircraft. I've noticed that a lot. But here's another thing. If they do decide, we're talking about gun barrels on 10 millimeter tanks. Here's another thing that frustrates a lot of players, myself included, is rotors on helicopters tend to break very easily. If what you're saying about gun barrels at 10 millimeter is true, then it'll be a godsend for landing struts, tail booms, tail rotors, and main rotors. For 10 millimeter helicopters.
Yeah, when I was discussing it with Will from PSC, his idea was to have, because he's a maniac, his idea was to have 2 sets of rotors. So you can have a set of rotors, which are the blades, for when it's landed, and then you can put on a disc for when they take it. So, but it's, that's Will for you. He just has these ideas. It's like the infantry. He wanted us to. He wants every pack of like Cold War infantry to come in fighting pose, and then also you get the dug-in unit, so you can move up with your guys moving, and then take them off and replace them with dug-in ones. So we have to see how he covers all of this, but certainly all the vehicles at least will be produced and available, and the infantry as well. So I'm just waiting for some. They've just done the mold for the Soviet infantry in 10 mil, so that's the sort of next thing they've said they're going to send me to have a look at. So
fantastic. I don't know about everybody else, but I'm excited. I really am.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Now, G, because we've got Piers here, we need him to get a talk about his Vietnam game.
I was going to mention that, but I didn't want to take the spotlight out of this game, because I'm ramped up, and this game hasn't even come out yet officially.
Nope.
And you're already talking about Vietnam. But yeah,
exactly.
Let's. Yeah. Heck, we're already over 2 hours. Let's go for 3. Go ahead, Piers. Let us talk to us about Vietnam.
Jim's doing dead bad food, isn't he?
Before we go, before we go to Vietnam, for people wanting to find out more information, and where's some hubs that they can hit up to keep an eye on what's going on for this one?
Pretty best place would be the NORTHAG group on Facebook.
There you go.
That tends to be where PSE are mainly posting stuff. PSE page on Facebook, and I stick stuff up on various forums, on Beasts of War, on Tabletop Forum. I tend to put stuff up there. So if you stick Battle Group NORTHAG in and go to the Facebook group, is probably the best one to look for. But as I say, most forums I tend to do a drive by and put pictures up.
Nice.
Sweet, excellent stuff.
Way to cover, Gaz. Way to cover.
before we go off on a tangent.
All right, Ralph, take us into
Draw a line in
Vietnam.
the sand, we can move on now.
Well, I know that you mentioned it the last time, didn't you, PS? When you won, you were saying that were you play testing or trialing a set of rules?
Yeah, well, last time I spoke to you guys, Warwick was in the process of working out the mechanics. That's now moved to when we actually, it was when we were doing the photos for NORTHAG. We spent the weekend playing the new NARM game instead of, we got the photos done really quickly, and then spent sort of 2 days playing NARM 68, which is the Vietnam game. And it's it's fantastic. I can't really say much more. It's just it's. I mean, I've written 2 sets of Vietnam rules in the past, and one Ambush Valley, which was for Ambush Alley. So I've kind of, I didn't want to write another set of rules for Vietnam. I've done it twice. So
related to? I'm sorry, was that related to Force on Force?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did a version for Ambush Alley, and then I did a second edition of Ambush Valley for Force on Force. So it was pretty much the same thing. So Warwick sort of went and did something different with the rules, and then then he came over and we sort of basically just played NARM 68 for about 2 days, and didn't really want to play anything else again after it, because I told Warwick what I wanted from what I wanted to do in an ARM game, and what I've always wanted to do is I want to play a tour of duty. I want to get a platoon of guys, and I want to take them through. Well, I want to take that platoon through 12 months of Vietnam War. I want to have a tour of duty, and that's what he's done. He's written a game. You could play standalone games, but the whole point of this game is that you play a campaign where the players are the Americans, and the referee, or the umpire, if you like, plays the VC. And the whole theme of the game is to see how your guys get through their tour of duty.
It's a really great idea, and I like how you're talking about a referee or an umpire, because we've experimented with stuff like that in Panzerblitz with Großdeutschland Division, trying to take them from Kursk until like the middle of 44, basically 1 year. And can you keep your battalion together? The problem is, okay, who's stuck playing the Soviets? Because obviously you can't, it's not the same 2 units don't keep running into each other, so you can't run this double-sided. You have to have an umpire or a referee. And I also like how you guys start in 68. That's definitely the most important year of Vietnam, I think.
Well, I think it's the reason we went out. I mean, although one person is sort of the referee and the VC, they still get to have their own bit of fun. Generally at the other player's expense, obviously. But they still get to do stuff. So what basically happens is not only do you play the game, but you also have a post-game section where it's run off a pack of cards. So you draw cards, and those cards will inform to you what sort of reinforcements your platoon's got, what the area of operations is like. So whether it's gone from being calm and nice and the locals are friendly, it may have stepped up a level, and now there's a few more VC infiltrated in the area. So and both players will get the cards. So the American player gets his cards afterwards and can see what's happened. So like after we had a game where because the games are randomly developed by the cards, at the start. We had a game which was just a single squad going out on a patrol. They had a patrol mission, so they basically had to go across the board and search 3 points on the table. And obviously the VC force is themed to that. Now, the area of operations I was assigned, thankfully, was quite a friendly area. So that affects what the cards do for the VC player. What it turned out I was actually facing in that squad game was I was facing one booby trap that was a spike pit, another booby trap that was a few grenades tied together, and a single Viet Cong mortar spotter with a pistol. That was it. But you don't know that as the American.
No. So
my game was basically me getting across the board, trying to search these 3 points while having shells rain down on me from this occasional mortar fire. And it was great. It was brilliant because you get that real sense of where the hell are people, you know. And I just couldn't see anybody because the referee doesn't have to put it on. He puts his stuff on as he wants to do things, and they don't necessarily appear from a table edge. They may just pop up in certain areas of the table. So you have to be very cautious as an American player where you go and what you do. Make sure you're covering each other, and that battle wasn't too bad. I had one guy did set off the booby trap, the grenades, because it was unfairly hidden beneath my search point. So he went to search one of the areas and set off the booby trap, but he got away okay. He got injured, but he was only lightly wounded, so he just missed the next game. And then you have this fun bit after the game where you roll to see if you've got any replacements. So any more guys come into the squad, you've got one of the cards when you draw it will tell you if you found any. You guys have been out foraging for equipment off the local marine base or have nicked something off somebody else. And it's all things like that really build up a personality.
The Army stealing from the Marine Corps, that never happens.
Well, no, it'd be the other way around, wouldn't it?
What? I'm sorry, what? What's that?
The Army, but, but all that, the idea is that you build a personality into your troops. And you have like an old 80s style character sheet for the platoon, so you can write their names in, and off you go. And then the second game we played went from this very small single patrol. I was able to bring the whole platoon out, including the M60 support guys, and I had buckets of support. I had a gunship in support. I had some artillery. And basically my mission was to go into this deserted village, and we knew the area I was going into was a hotspot for VC, so we were actually going in purposely to get ambushed to sort of draw them in and then hit them with everything we had. And it worked really well. I got ambushed really well. so I then had to pull this poor point squad that went in, got absolutely mauled. And of course, what the beauty of it was I had one guy killed, right? And it was the guy who'd arrived as a replacement after the first game, and he took the place of the guy who was wounded by the booby trap because he was out for the next mission, so because he was lightly injured. So this poor new guy, like, nobody even knew who his name was. This guy just turned up, and he got assigned to this. The section was out on point, and he just walked across the table his first day out and just got shot through the head by a Viet Cong sniper.
Oh wow!
If you look at the numbers in Vietnam, that's actually what happened.
Are you going to have some kind of rule that plays to that effect? That if it's a replacement that's new and goes into patrol or conflict, that there's going to be some kind of...
Oh yeah, they're crap. They really are. Yeah, they just go to pieces. All the troops have different sort of ability levels.
Uh-huh.
So the guys and your platoon, when you take the platoon over, some of them may be going in a couple of weeks. So your platoon isn't necessarily all going to be with you for the 12 months. It's just you as commander. It's your tour of duty.
Okay.
So some guys, after my first game, 2 of my really good veterans just vanished. They got on the bird and went home. It was that their time was up. They'd done their 12 months. So
10
they
days
went
and
home.
a wake up, a pause for the cause, and I'm like,
Exactly.
I won't finish the rest of it.
So you sort of hoping your best guys don't bugger off back to the States,
Right.
and then you've got to sort of fit these new guys in, or if they're really unfortunate like him, I hadn't even written his name in the character sheet, you know, and we were playing it, and Warwick said, "Who was he?" I went, "Don't know. We never found out his name. You know, he just turned up and
Private FNG. That was his name.
Yeah.
nobody even knew who he was. You know, he just turned up yesterday, got off the bird, and got shot. You know, oh well, never mind. Kind of thing. It's really, but it was great.
Sad,
And then
but statistically, that was the case. Like your
Yeah.
your survivability in your first 3 months was like, or your first 90 days was way lower. And if you made it through your first 90 days, maybe you had a chance to actually learn something. And plus, now you had other people in the platoon that would stick up for you or whatever. And you know, but yeah, those first 90 days, I can't remember what the actual numbers were, but it's something. It's disproportionate. It's something like 40% of the people that were hit in Vietnam were hit in like the first 3 months, or you know, something like that.
yeah, exactly. It's the idea is to try and bring all those things in and try and make it feel realistic and sort of put players through that worry of not actually knowing what you're going to be facing.
So are these are the situations and the scenarios kind of like history agnostic or whatever? Because you said I think that they were designed by the system or like generated by the cards.
Kind of, yeah. So the idea is that they're all themed. The book is going to be themed purely around American Marines or Army against Viet Cong. So there won't be any other forces in it apart from that. And the idea is that it just lets us add in that sort of period and that sort of ethos of 68, and obviously you can go either side of that. But we wanted to keep it very basic as to what its focus was. So the focus is you're that platoon leader, and you've got to get your platoon through your tour of duty, and that's it. You're going to face VC. Obviously, there's all different types of VC. So you've got local VC, you've got cadres, hardline, the odd NVA dude coming down to help support them.
I was going to ask if the NVA were in the game.
Well, they're not in it. There's the occasional NVA advisor or something like that, or some really well-equipped VC that may have the odd NVA dude with them. But it's very much focused purely on Viet Cong versus Americans. And the reason for that is we wanted the game to sort of encompass that sort of classic view of Vietnam of, going out running S&D patrols or going out and searching that village and checking what's there. And it uses a chit system like Battle Group, but it functions differently. And you have a battle rating similar to Battle Group, but you draw chits as stuff happens to you. So as guys get wounded, the Americans take chits. As guys get killed, you don't want guys getting killed if you're Americans. You have to take a lot of chits if that happens. So you're always balancing, and the way the order system works is everybody can do something, but they're very limited in what they can do for free. And then you draw a chit at the start of each round, and the number on that chit is the number of special actions your guys can do. So say you draw 1 or 2 chits depending on the size of the game, and you've got 6 special actions, so you can then use those to do different things. So doing stuff for free is like moving and laying down suppressive fire. Everybody can do that. But if you want to do sort of things like aim fire, or if you want your dude with the shotgun to kick in the door of the hooch and then blast the 2 guys on the other side, you need to use these special order sort of points, if you like. And because that's random, you can plan to a degree what you want to do. But it means what I found when I was playing is you really have to be careful how you deploy your troops, because you want to make sure if you're sending guys out, as I did, to go in and take this one particular house, I had to make sure that there was plenty of guys who could lay down suppressing fire to cover them, because I didn't want to get into a situation where I'd drawn the chits and had like virtually no ability to do any special orders, and the guys were stuck out in the middle of nowhere with no support. So it's a very tactical game, and because the numbers are small and you're playing it on a decent sized table, it's really crucial where your guys are going.
Nice. So, Pierce, what scale are you thinking of this? Is this going to be 20, 28 mil or smaller? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Warwick's planning 28 mil, and
Okay.
I'm planning 20 mil.
Okay.
As long as you can tell what the figure is,
Yeah.
you can play it in anything really.
Okay.
But I think it will suit 20 mil and 28 mil more, because I think you have that level of personality in the model at that scale. Like a couple of the figures, even after the sort of 4 games we played over the weekend, there were certain figures who I knew who they were.
Okay.
Every time I put them on the board, it'd be that's Sergeant Apone. He's leading that fire team. Sorry, he can't go with that one. He's got to go there.
Sergeant Apone? Is he fighting aliens or just Viet Cong?
Just Viet Cong this time. He did have a big shotgun though. It was ace.
Nice. So 2 questions I have for you.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go on.
The 2 questions I have for you is A, when are we going to see the rule book?
Yeah.
And 2 or B, when are we going to see miniatures for this, or are you just going to open it up to any company miniatures?
Yeah, well, I mean, the book will be whenever Warwick decides to finish writing it, and we'll do some photos and he'll put it out. It's going to be through Warwick's company, publishing company, where he's done a Soldiers series. So it'll go through that. It won't be with PSC or anything like that. So it'll be a completely independent one. So it'll be released that way, like he's released Soldiers of God and Soldiers of Rome. So this one will be NARM 68. And the idea is that by just doing it ourselves, we'll then go on and do something else with it. So the idea is the next book will be sort of Special Forces, NVA, and Arvin, and go that way with it. When it is, I don't know. It could be end of the year, but I suspect it will probably be more next year. All depends what PSC, how PSC ask us to do the next sort of battle group books and the next the NORTHAG expansion and things like that. At the moment, we have no idea what they want us to work on, because now they've bought the systems. We sort of take a back seat until they say to us, right, can you go and do battle group Stalingrad, and we'll go off and do it.
Gotcha.
So when they're not asking us to do stuff, we have loads of time to work on things. So like Warwick is working away on NARM 68. I've gone completely the other way, and I've gone back to medievals to use the Soldiers of system to do something medieval. I've been picking away at a World War II version of NORTHAG as well. So, but yeah, release. I don't know. We kind of like to do a Vietnam game at Salute next year, as a sort of, as a demonstration of it at least. But as I say, it'll all depend what happens with the next battle group book and what's going on with the NORTHAG book, and when PSC want those out. 'Cause I suspect the next Centag book will probably be for Salute next year. I should guess.
Oh, nice.
Not too long, but
Good. We had a question from one of the people listening right now, and they are asking about any updates for Battle Group Pacific.
It's been done for ages. We finished it months ago. Yeah, I don't know. As far as I know, it's all done. It's finished. PSC have got the print draft. What has stopped them getting it out is that people wanted them to focus on getting reprints done.
Okay.
So PSC, to be fair to them, have gone out and reprinted 5 books now. So they've basically brought all the out-of-print titles back into print, apart from, I think the only book out of print now is Battle Group Blitzkrieg. So they it's taken them a sizable amount of cash to get all those books back in print. The knock-on effect of that was that it's delayed Pacific. But I mean, from talking to PSC, I imagine it's going to be probably June, July, something like that. Um, Another reason they're sort of holding it back is I know they're doing figures for
Oh,
it,
okay.
which are, I think they're doing 15 mil and 20 mil Japanese and USMC. So it will be worth waiting for. But as I say, the book is done, gone from us. It's purely just waiting on PSC. But a lot of people wanted them to get a lot of books back in print. So I think PSC, when they took over, decided the first thing they do, rather than put another book out, would be to go back and get things like Kursk, the rule book, Overlord, and get all these get all of them back in print, so that at least new players can go and buy the books.
Sure.
So, but yeah, I suspect it will be in the summer. I say June. I'd go out on a limb and say probably mid-July, because I think they were aiming to have it released at a show round sort of June, July time. So, but as I say, yeah, it's all done. It's Pacific, so it's US Marines, Japanese, and it covers Burma as well.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
Well, that's exciting news. Guys, any last-minute thoughts while we wrap this up? Anyone?
Yep, I'm all good.
All good?
No.
Well, I can tell you, as you can tell by the excitement in the room, Piers, I'm excited for this to happen. Obviously, my two counterparts there over in merry old England, they're being very restrained, British, proper, It reminds me of a funny story. I'm going to go back to, it was 3 years ago now. God, 3 years now. When GW had their preview at Adepticon, when they were done, the place went wild. People are clapping and cheering, and we're really excited. This was in America, obviously. And then we went to UK Games Expo that same year, and they did the same presentation at UK. And when they were done, it was like, thank you, gentlemen, ladies, for coming. And everybody was like, a little golf clap, and that was it. I was like, okay. So,
I pre-ordered NORTHAG, so I'm just waiting for my miniatures.
I know,
quite
but you
happily.
guys are so restrained. We're out there whooping it up, but then I see you guys at football tournaments, and you guys are, slugging it out in the stadium and, being all crazy, and then, something like this. So it's like, okay, whatever. But Piers, I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, me too.
I am very excited for all of this. Nom 68 sounds amazing. So
yeah, I think that's going to be. I think it's going to be the first time people are going to get a Vietnam game that gives them Full Metal Jacket or Apocalypse Now in a book. It's going to be that sort of flavor to it, I hope.
Yeah, I like the whole investment in a platoon and living through the 12 months of your tour duty. So if you guys backed NORTHAG, make sure you look out for those models. If you were a backer, check your email for a link to the PDF file for the rule book. The rule book is amazing. Really enjoy it. I cannot wait to play test. Hopefully we'll get a play test here soon. To the rest of the team, Jim, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And,
I just didn't want to talk too much is all.
I know. That's why we're here, for us to talk it up. And then there's Gaz who couldn't shut up. So thank you, everybody. This is G for the SITREP podcast, and we will see you soon. Jim, we have HK Ops tomorrow, and then let's see. Gaz, are you doing any more Bruin Views this week?
Yeah, I should be able to do one this week, Thursday, if nobody's using the time slot.
Perfect. So keep up on those projects, and we are going to definitely do a play test of NORTHAG once I get all the 6 mils put together until we can get our 10 mil, and then we'll play it then as a comparison with full-blown rules. So we'll be filming that as well at some point. So thank you guys, everybody. Again, Piers, thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday. And thank you, guys, and we'll see you in the next episode of the SITREP podcast. Take care.